Wisps of dark energy drift through a gray, overcast sky. The purple mist descends into a jagged mountain crevice, glowing with a faint, ominous light. Deep inside the cave, a man hangs from the ceiling, bound by heavy chains over a pool of blood. A voice from the shadows asks if he's doing okay. It's Yeon So-hyun, the first young master of the Luyang sword clan. He's a total mess, bloodied, blindfolded, and barely able to make a sound. His arms are stretched wide, locked into the stone walls with cold iron. He lets out a muffled scream of agony as the chains rattle against his shredded skin. Flashback to when things first went south. The torturer used pliers to rip his tongue right out of his mouth while the unknown entity watched. Yeon So-hyun thrashes in pain, his face a mask of blood and silent screams. Chained hooks hang empty against the damp cave walls. He desperately wants to know who's talking to him. He shakes his head, blinded by the bandages. The spirit reminds him that his eyes are gone, taken by red-hot iron skewers. The voice mocks his delicate arms, nodding they've never done a day of hard labor. It looks down at his mangled legs, which used to do nothing but stroll through peaceful courtyards. He hangs there limp and broken. Every limb was severed, piece by piece, while he drifted in and out of consciousness. Yeon So-hyun's memories start flooding back, grounding him in the horrific reality of his situation. The unknown entity manifests as a glowing purple orb in front of him, mocking how long he's been rotting in this hole. He finally manages to ask about his family, desperate for any news. The antagonist just laughs. It thinks it's hilarious that he's worried about them when he's in this state. Then it drops the bomb. His entire clan has been completely wiped out. The monstrous mouth looms over him, telling him to remember everything he's lost. He sees a vision of his home under siege, arrows raining down on the burning buildings. A broken sword and a tattered flag stand in the middle of a burning battlefield. A man in black robes grabs a family member by the hair, ready to deliver a final blow. His eldest sister was beaten and then killed by her own husband, who didn't want anything to do with a ruined family. His second sister, a skilled swordswoman, is shown exhausted and defeated on the ground. Bandits with glowing eyes drag her away after destroying her energy center as punishment for her clan's downfall. Yeon So-hyun thrashes in his chains, screaming that he knew nothing about this. He always thought his brothers would protect the clan. The unknown entity asks if he's really going to pretend he was that clueless. It shows a burning pagoda and reminds him that his brothers were busy committing fratricide. Bodies are piled high in the courtyard. They slaughtered each other just to claim the title of family head. While his family was tearing itself apart, Yeon So-hyun was always buried in his books. He's shown as a young man in a library, completely ignoring the world around him. He begs, claiming he was just a commoner who couldn't have known. The spirit spits the word commoner back at him with pure disgust. The purple energy flares up. It finds his act incredibly frustrating. A flashback shows him at age 4, already helping his mother compile massive medical texts. By age 5, the kid was advising the emperor on agriculture. At age 6, he predicted a massive drought by reading the stars, saving thousands from starvation. The unknown entity screams that even the greatest strategists in history were nothing compared to him. It gets right in his face, asking if he remembers his true self now. Yeon So-hyun finally stops fighting. He bows his head and admits that he knew everything all along. A single red star blazes in the night sky. He was born under the heavenly killing star. A vision of his potential self appears, a warrior standing atop a mountain of corpses. He knew if he got involved, he'd be the one shedding all that blood. The spirit laughs again. It doesn't matter now. Everyone is dead and his dark destiny has been fulfilled. He hangs from the ceiling, a broken man in tattered robes. Bound by heavy iron and his own dark destiny, he finally accepts that he can't escape what's coming. With his eyes hidden behind blood-soaked bandages, Yeon So-hyun grits his teeth. He decides to leave his fate in the hands of heaven, hoping that nothing slips through its vast net of justice. Chained hooks hang from the cave walls like skeletal fingers. He tries to believe that even if he doesn't act, the wicked will face their judgment. He hangs limp over a pool of his own blood. In his heart, he still clings to the idea of heavenly laws and causality. Suddenly, a massive, clawed hand of dark energy manifests in the darkness, mocking his pathetic belief in divine justice. The spirit sneers, asking if he really thinks heaven cares about a fragile human like him. It's an ancient voice, full of cold, cosmic indifference. The spirit offers to show him a tale from the ancient past, a time of myths where the truth about causality was first revealed. A vision of an ancient mountain range appears, bathed in a pale, golden sunset. This is the world as it used to be. In that distant era, many sought enlightenment, believing in an absolute order that governed the universe. They were convinced that every evil deed would eventually be met with a just price. It was a comforting lie they told themselves. Some spend their whole lives in meditation, certain that their righteousness would be rewarded. But the reality was far different. The wicked often lived in luxury, surrounded by gold and comfort until the day they died. Meanwhile, the innocent were exploited and left to suffer, dying long before their time was up. Good or evil, it didn't seem to matter. In the end, everyone was just walking toward the same inevitable end. Once life is over, both the saint and the sinner return to a handful of dust. There's no grand cosmic balancing of the scales. The vision shifts to a swirling mass of red and black energy. The spirit asks how anyone could possibly find justice in such a heartless world. A twisted, skeletal tree of shadows looms in the vision, representing the cruel illusion of heavenly order. The spirit declares that heaven and earth are indifferent to human suffering. There was never any rightful judgment, only the cold vacuum of existence. Back in the cave, Yeon So-hyun lets out a bitter laugh. The idea of divine punishment now seems like a sick joke. He realizes that judgment is just a fiction made up by people who have lost everything and have nowhere else to turn. The spirit's energy flares up, glowing a violent shade of pink. It asks him point-blank, "Do you wish for power?" Without a second of hesitation, Yeon So-hyun answers. He wants it more than anything. The spirit looms closer, its presence filling the entire cavern. It asks if he's willing to do whatever it takes to change everything and save those he lost. It warns him that the price is eternal suffering for his soul. He'll never find rest, even in death. He doesn't care. He just says, "I do" again. He's ready to seize this chance, using every single ability he's given to take back his life. The energy explodes around him. The spirit says that finally he can face who he was truly meant to be, someone who rules over destiny itself. Dark purple energy surges through his body, shattering the chains that held him. This is the moment of his transformation. A wicked grin spreads across his face. He can feel the power beginning to take hold, a dark and ancient force flowing into him. The bandages on his legs begin to glow as the dark energy intensifies. Something incredible is about to happen. The spirit commands him to open his eyes and look at it. One of his eyes snaps open, glowing with a fierce purple light. The broken chains fall to the floor with a heavy metallic clang. He's no longer a prisoner. The spirit describes a legendary book, bound in the skin of someone who hated humanity. Its pages are filled with a dark and ancient wisdom. This is the scripture of the dark heaven's tremor. It was written in the blood of one who hated heaven and held together by the tendons of the vengeful. He reaches out toward the glowing book, his hand wreathed in shadows. He's ready to claim his new heritage. Tendrils of blood and shadow connect the book to his very soul. Their paths are finally aligned. He accepts the contract, entrusting his entire soul to this dark scripture. He has nothing left to lose. The energy reaches a fever pitch as he's officially recognized as the contractor. The entire cavern shakes with the force of the pact. The name of the scripture is etched into his very being. From this day forward, he is bound to the dark heaven's tremor. Ancient characters appear in the air, glowing with an ominous red light. This scripture will defy heaven itself to consume all evil. A horde of screaming, skeletal figures rises from the shadows, representing the countless souls consumed by this power. With the book in his hands, Yeon So-hyun is ready to judge the wicked and deliver the punishment they deserve. A massive bolt of purple energy erupts, granting him a new chance at life. The world is about to change forever. The unknown entity's voice echoes as Yeon So-hyun is enveloped in shadows. He is told that from this moment on, he will breathe in the darkness. His gaze sharpens, a purple glow reflecting the new dark power flowing through his veins. Clad in the aura of a ruler, he holds the scripture close. He is destined to become the judge of karma, striking with a sword of absolute darkness. At the Luyang Sword Clan's pavilion of original enlightenment, a blinding pillar of light marks the return of the first young master. The morning sun shines through the gates of the noble estate, unaware of the soul that has just crossed back through time. Yon So-hyun lies still on his bed, his face calm as the world around him returns to a time before the bloodshed. Suddenly, his eyes snap open, filled with the terrifying clarity of a man who has died and come back. He bolts upright, gasping for air as the sweat of a nightmare that was all too real clings to his skin. His chest heaves as he tries to steady his racing heart, the phantom pain of the chains still lingering. He looks around in a daze, his mind struggling to reconcile the horrific cave with the pristine room he now finds himself in. His gaze wanders over the familiar scrolls and pottery of a life he thought he had lost forever. Confusion turns to disbelief as he recognizes his old room within the pavilion of original enlightenment. His bare feet touch the floor, the physical sensation confirming that he is indeed alive and whole. The spirit's promise of a second chance was true. Standing before the mirror, he sees a younger version of himself, unscarred and untouched by the years of torment. It's February of his 17th year. He has returned to the very moment before the tragedy that destroyed his life began. From outside the door, he hears the muffled voices of his servants, wondering if their master is finally awake. Yon So-hyun narrows his eyes, his senses sharper than they ever were before his regression. Outside, the servants whisper with blatant disrespect, calling him the swordless one and mocking his pathetic state. One servant sneers, recalling how he was once famous for his brilliance, but has since become nothing but a disappointing rumor. Despite the thick, soundproof walls of the pavilion, Yon So-hyun hears every single word of their mockery with perfect clarity. He realizes it isn't just his hearing that has changed. A dark, familiar energy begins to coil around his body. He watches in awe as dark, veined patterns erupt across his hand, pulsating with a raw, demonic power. His strength and stamina feel limitless. The scripture of the dark heavens tremor has followed him into the past. Every one of his 5 senses has been vastly improved, granting him an awareness that far surpasses any mortal warrior. He stands enveloped in a shroud of purple and black flames, the physical manifestation of the dark heavens tremor. He realizes that in this state, his appearance is anything but human. He looks like a monster born of pure killing intent. Demonic energy has seeped into his very bones, turning him into something the world would fear, a demonic human. He knows he cannot step outside looking like this. Carefully, he focuses his will, trying to smooth out his expression and hide the darkness. A chill smile touches his lips as he feels the power obey him, retreating beneath the surface of his skin. For a moment, his teeth sharpen into fangs as he wonders what it even means to be human anymore. He chuckles to himself, deciding that such philosophical questions are meaningless in the face of his new mission. His face settles into a mask of calm, presentable nobility, though his eyes still hold a depth of ancient coldness. "Shall we begin, then?" he whispers to the empty room, the game of fate starting anew. He walks toward the doors, his steps silent and deliberate on the wooden floor. With a firm push, he throws open the heavy doors, stepping out from the shadows of his room. The bright morning sun hits his face, and he closes his eyes, savoring the warmth of a life he never thought he'd see again. Sunlight spills into the corridor, washing away the lingering coldness of the cave and the chains. He stands on the balcony, his long hair catching the breeze as he gazes out over the estate of the Luyang Sword Clan. The servants outside immediately bow, their voices polite and submissive despite the venom they had been spitting moments ago. Yon So-hyun looks down at them, a ghost of a smile on his face. The sunlight feels different today. It feels like a witness to his rebirth. As he walks past, the servants exchange bewildered glances, sensing an unsettling change in the young master they once pitied. He flexes his hand, the horrific power of the scripture lying dormant but ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. Yoon So-hyun stands on the balcony, closing his eyes as the morning sun washes over him. The warmth is a stark, welcome contrast to the freezing, eternal darkness of the cave he left behind. A rare, genuine smile touches his lips. For the first time in an eternity, he feels truly alive, even if his soul is now tied to the abyss. Turning to a nearby servant, his voice is calm, but carries an undeniable weight. He commands that every single servant under his authority be summoned immediately. The servant stammers in shock, his eyes wide as he looks at the young master he previously thought was a weakling. He can't help but feel a sudden chill. Soon, dozens of servants are gathered in the courtyard of the Pavilion of Original Enlightenment, the air thick with their low whispers and confused mutterings. They continue to gossip with open disdain, complaining about their interrupted naps and mocking the swordless one for supposedly trying to act important. One elder servant scowls, wondering why they are being kept waiting. He assumes the young master is merely trying to flex his authority to compensate for his lack of talent. Yoon So-hyun looks out over the crowd of people who will one day betray him. "Is everyone here?" he asks, his tone devoid of any warmth. He stands perfectly still, his long black hair framing a face that has seen more horrors than any of these people could ever imagine. Without any preamble, he delivers a shocking decree. From this moment on, none of them are needed in the Pavilion of Original Enlightenment. The crowd erupts in disbelief. He tells them to report to the steward department for reassignment, his blue-gray eyes staring through them as if they are already ghosts. Indignant and furious, the servants begin to shout over each other, refusing to accept such a sudden and life-altering order. The courtyard descends into chaos as they scream about their reputations and the unfairness of the young master's decision, their faces red with misplaced anger. Yoon So-hyun watches them, a dark, blood-red memory of his former self's naivety flickering in his mind. He once believed that kindness would be repaid with kindness. He had been a fool, thinking that sincerity could eventually bridge the gap between a master and those who despised him. He realized now that his belief had been a weakness. A cold, sharp smirk begins to curl the corners of his mouth. The servants' shouting begins to die down as they notice the unsettling expression on the young master's face, a primitive fear starting to take hold. Yoon So-hyun throws his head back and laughs, a hollow, terrifying sound that echoes through the pavilion, his dark aura beginning to manifest. He stops laughing and fixes a piercing gaze on a specific servant, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he calls him forward. Trembling with terror, the servant bows low, his arrogance completely evaporated under the pressure of Yoon So-hyun's presence. "Who am I?" Yoon So-hyun asks. When the servant answers that he is the first young master, Yoon So-hyun nods, confirming his identity and his absolute power over them. He asks if they have forgotten their place, daring to question the orders of their master. His words are like shards of ice, cutting through the morning air. The servant's face pales as he realizes the gravity of his mistake. The word, insubordination, rings in his ears like a death knell. With a movement too fast for the human eye to follow, Yoon So-hyun delivers justice. Blood sprays across the stone floor as he declares that the price of their disrespect must be paid in full. The servants are practically shaking in their boots, terrified that the young master might actually lash out. One guy throws himself onto the floor, desperately begging for his life as he grovels at his feet. Another servant looks like he's about to have a heart attack, sweating buckets as he watches the scene unfold. They start crying about having families to feed, claiming they never meant to be disrespectful to him. Yoon So-hyun just puts a finger to his lips, telling them to be quiet with a cold, unsettling smile. He looks down at the row of groveling men, wondering why he ever thought dealing with people like this was difficult. To him, this isn't just about punishment. It's a calculated move to clear out every single spy watching his residence. He tells them he won't hold their behavior against them, since he's the one who let them grow so complacent. But then his eyes go cold as he gives the final order, "Pack your things and get out." One servant is so relieved he didn't get executed that he keeps thanking the young master over and over. The man is just happy to keep his head, even if he's being kicked out of the pavilion. So Hyun tells them to leave, and have the head steward handpick exactly one person to replace them. As the servants scramble to escape, So-hyun stands there soaking in the morning sunlight. He looks at his restored hand, still processing the fact that his body is actually whole again. The sun feels warm on his skin, but his mind is still stuck in the years of darkness he endured. He remembers the demonic pact, realizing he's now fated to breathe in the darkness. He's fully embraced his role as a creature of shadow to punish all the karma in this world. Meanwhile, at the clan headquarters, a subordinate comes rushing in with an urgent message. He reports that the first young master has suddenly cleared out every single servant from the pavilion. The message is delivered while the head steward listens in silence, processing the news. The different factions within the clan are already losing their minds, calling the young master an insect for acting up. The news spreads quickly through the Luyang Sword clan's steward department. The head steward sits in his office, realizing the day he's been waiting for might finally be here. He knows So-hyun spent 10 years acting like he didn't care about the world, only to suddenly fire everyone. He still remembers the way So-hyun looked whenever he picked up a sword in the past. Back then, the boy's martial talent was something terrifyingly brilliant. People who saw him couldn't believe their eyes, shocked by his incredible skill. He had the form of a master swordsman who had already reached the very top of his craft. The head steward decides it's finally time for him to stop watching from the sidelines and take action. He hears a voice at the door. It's Young-ah coming to pay her respects. He greets her and tells her to come closer because he has something important to say. Young-ah walks into the room, ready to receive her orders from the elder. He tells her he's been extremely careful about choosing her next master because he respects her talent. He explains that the clan's succession structure is about to change, and So-hyun will be at the center of it. The head steward leaves the choice up to her. Is she willing to go watch over the first young master? She clenches her fist, clearly weighing the importance of the task. She agrees to obey the command, knowing her special golden eyes are exactly what's needed for this job. Young-ah's eyes can see things others can't, and now she's going to use them to uncover So-hyun's real intentions. Young-ah arrives at the massive gates of the Pavilion of Original Enlightenment, the secluded residence of the clan's first young master. She stares at the towering structure, finally reaching the place she was sent to serve. Rumors about its scale didn't do it justice. She never imagined the gate would be this grand. Her thoughts drift back to the head steward's warning that the family's power is reflected in their imposing architecture. Even for a young master living in total isolation, the level of security here is unsettling. As she approaches, a guard sitting by the entrance snaps out of his daze and demands to know who goes there. Young-ah's spiritual sight kicks in, and she's shocked to see guards dozing off in broad daylight. But these aren't just lazy sentries. She can tell they're actually high-level masters. It makes sense. Even a neglected heir of the Sword clan still carries the weight of a legitimate lineage. She keeps her composure and introduces herself as the new maid. She presents the written order from the head steward to prove she's supposed to be there. One of the guards lets out a massive yawn and tells his partner to just let her through. Young-ah finds it strange that they don't even bother to search her before opening the way. With a heavy groan, the massive wooden gates are pushed open. She steps inside, caught off guard by the sheer scale of the inner grounds. Ahead lies a lush forest path, looking remarkably peaceful and bright. Before she heads in, the guard stops her with one last, chilling warning. He tells her to never, under any circumstances, step off the designated forest path. She begins her trek, but the deeper she goes, the more the atmosphere starts to feel oppressive. It doesn't take long for her to realize this is far from an ordinary forest trail. The entire area is a complex, suffocating formation designed to trap anyone who wanders off. If it weren't for her special golden eyes, she'd already be lost in the dense, swirling energy. The trees themselves feel like part of a massive trap that's about to crush her like a bug. From above, the dark magic completely swallows her small figure. A mysterious voice notes her lack of internal energy, wondering how she can even perceive the barrier. A sudden chill runs down her spine as she realizes she's no longer alone. She whips around, searching the thick brush for the source of the gaze. Emerging from the trees, a tall figure in white robes approaches with an effortless stride. It's Yoon So-hyun, and he's curious how a common girl is able to look directly at him within this formation. A cold smirk plays on his lips as he labels her as something quite unusual. Terror strikes her as she locks eyes with the young master. Her spiritual sight reflects a dark, monstrous silhouette looming over her. Suddenly, her world plunges into total darkness, leaving her blind and disoriented. A faint, eerie light appears in the void, drawing her deeper into a mental hallucination. She gasps for air, finding herself submerged in a dark, cold abyss. Shadowy hands begin to ripple through the surface of the black water around her. She lets out a desperate scream as she starts to sink into the terrifying depths. The hands lunge out, grabbing her body and muffling her cries for help. She begs for anyone to save her, as the darkness prepares to pull her under for good. Reaching out into the void, she prays for a miracle. Suddenly, a firm hand catches her, pulling her back from the edge of the nightmare. Young-ah loses consciousness as So-hyun catches her, having seen enough to know this maid is different. Yoon So-hyun watches the unconscious girl, thinking the head steward managed to send someone truly interesting this time. Young-ah is laid out in a guest room, still recovering from her ordeal in the forest. She finally blinks her eyes open, her mind a complete fog as she tries to figure out where she is. Looking around, she's struck by the room's simple but incredibly high-end decor. Her gaze falls onto a small pile of books left on the wooden floor. Picking one up, she's stunned to see detailed illustrations of medical practices and martial arts techniques. She runs her fingers over the ink, recognizing the weight of the knowledge in her hands. Her golden eyes widen as she flips through the pages. These aren't just common manuals. They contain deep secrets of various sword sects and breathing regulations. She looks at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, realizing the entire room is filled with forbidden texts. This kind of library should be locked away in the imperial palace, not tucked away in a remote pavilion. A light sound catches her attention, drawing her gaze toward the sliding doors. Petals drift through the air as she focuses on the movement outside. A pale hand reaches out and slides the door open. Young-ah lets out a soft gasp, completely mesmerized by the sight before her. Outside, a massive garden is in full bloom, with cherry blossoms raining down over a winding river. It's the middle of winter outside the gates, but in here it feels like a warm spring day. Yoon So-hyun stands in the middle of the courtyard, casually asking if she slept well before telling her to join him. Seeing him clearly for the first time, she's struck by his noble, if somewhat chilling, presence. She snaps out of it and quickly shouts a reply, her face heating up. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, the pavilion takes on a golden, ethereal glow. Inside, So-hyun sits across from her, remarking that for such a small girl, she was surprisingly heavy to carry. Young-ah freezes, her embarrassment reaching a breaking point as she remembers fainting in the forest. So-hyun teases her further, describing how she just fell right into his arms, while she frantically tries to deny it. He drops the act and explains that she was lucky he found her during his walk, or she wouldn't have survived the night. Overwhelmed by gratitude, she bows until her forehead touches the floor, vowing to serve him with her life. But his tone suddenly turns ice cold, as he tells her he never agreed to accept her service. He tosses the head steward's official order onto the floor, making it clear he doesn't take orders from anyone. The sudden shift in pressure leaves her trembling with fear. Fearing she's already failed her mission, she begs for mercy and even asks him to end her life if he won't take her in. So-hyun looks down at her with a bored expression, finding it ironic that she's asking for death from the person who just saved her. She doubles down on her promise, swearing to do absolutely anything he asks of her. As he watches her, he notes the golden light in her eyes, the unmistakable mark of a woman from his past life. A small, knowing smile touches his lips as he reflects on the twisted nature of fate. To him, she is the golden-eyed witch, a figure he recognizes even if they never met face-to-face before he regressed. He leans in close and asks a simple question. By the way, do you know how to cook? Caught off guard by the sudden domestic request, She can only blink in confusion. So-hyun repeats the question with a predatory smirk, clearly planning something. Soon after, Young-ah finds herself in the kitchen, fanning a roaring fire to heat the stove. Even as she works, a flash of that horrific demonic face from her vision flickers through her mind. She lets out a heavy sigh, trying to convince herself that the monster she saw was just a trick of the forest. Slapping her cheeks to focus, she tells herself to forget the nightmares and get to work on the master's meal. Young-ah stands in the kitchen, her hands moving mechanically as she chops ingredients, her thoughts still racing from her encounter with the first young master. She berates herself for losing her cool so easily, noting that while she was shaken to her core, So-hyun never once lost his calm composure. Suddenly, So-hyun leans over her shoulder, his voice startling her as he asks if meatballs are on the menu for dinner. She nearly jumps out of her skin, her face turning a bright shade of red as she tries to stammer out a response about the importance of the meal. Seeing her flustered state, So-hyun simply smiles and tells her he's famished, urging her not to keep him waiting. "Yes," she whispers, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watches him step away. A short time later, Young-ah presents a lavish spread of dishes, and So-hyun is genuinely impressed by how quickly she managed to prepare such a feast. He takes his seat at the head of the table and commands her to join him, but she respectfully declines, intending to eat only after he's finished. His expression hardens instantly, and he gives her a single, non-negotiable order: "Sit." "Do not make me repeat myself," he warns, and Young-ah quickly complies, her previous confidence vanishing under his intense gaze. To her shock, he uses his own chopsticks to lift a meatball from one of the plates and offers it to her. She stares at the bowl in her hands, completely bewildered by this sudden show of informal kindness from a noble. He continues to pile food onto her plate, ignoring her protests about the impropriety of a servant eating before their master. With a firm look, he tells her to eat, leaving her with no choice but to accept. Blushing deeply, she takes a small, hesitant bite of the food she prepared. She chews slowly, her golden eyes fixed on the bowl as So-hyun watches her with interest, asking for her opinion on the flavor. He then takes a piece for himself, curious to see if the taste lives up to the mouth-watering aroma. His eyes light up with genuine delight as he praises her skill, nodding that the simple flavors are balanced to perfection. He hands her his empty bowl with a satisfied clatter, demanding another serving immediately. The meal continues in high spirits, with So-hyun eating with an appetite that seems far too large for his lean frame. As night falls over the pavilion, the master's voice can still be heard from inside, relentlessly asking for just one more bowl. Finally, Young-ah has to deliver the bad news. There isn't a single scrap of food left in the entire kitchen. So-hyun sets his chopsticks down with a sigh, admitting he still feels a void in his stomach, but deciding it's best to call it a night. He brushes off her offer of tea, deciding that a strong wine would be a better way to settle his persistent hunger. Later, he sits alone on the roof under the cold glow of the full moon, his brow furrowed in confusion. He realizes that even after a massive feast, his void hunger remains completely unsatisfied, a side effect of the scripture of the dark heavens tremor. A dark, mocking smile plays on his lips, as he wonders if the price of such godlike power is simply an endless appetite. Suddenly, a deep, guttural voice echoes through the air, telling him that the price is far from simple. Cold, shadowy hands emerge from the darkness, clamping down on his face and making him gasp in shock. The monstrous face of the unknown entity looms over him, its single purple eye glowing with malevolent intent. Swirling dark energy begins to leak from So-hyun's body, enveloping him in an aura of pure malice. His own expression goes blank, his consciousness seemingly slipping away as the demonic force takes hold. The entity whispers directly into his ear, announcing that the time for their feast has finally arrived. With a sudden surge of power, a foot stomps down on the roof, shattering the tiles as the demon's voice roars for enjoyment. So-hyun's body is launched into the night sky, trailing a wake of purple energy like a predator on the hunt. The scene shifts to the bustling streets of Luoyang, settling on a popular inn where travelers gather for late-night meals. Inside, an unnamed Luoyang guest, A stocky man in ornate blue robes with a golden belt and a gray goatee argues loudly with the innkeeper. Ignoring the innkeeper's warnings that the establishment is full, the arrogant guest storms toward what he thinks is an empty table. He comes to a sudden halt, his eyes narrowing as he spots something unusual in the shadows of the booth. His face instantly pales, sweat beading on his forehead as he stares in absolute horror at the sight before him. Close-up shots reveal a set of sharp, blood-stained teeth tearing into a large hunk of raw, dripping meat. It's Yoon So-hyun, his eyes wide and glowing with a feral, monstrous light, as he gorged himself on raw flesh like a wild animal. Inside the inn, Yoon So-hyun stands hunched over a table, frantically devouring the food, his mind clouded by a dark, insatiable craving that tells him nothing is enough. The unnamed Luyang guest stares in paralyzed horror, his face contorted with a fear so deep it seems to drain the color from his skin. His knees buckle as he gasps out the words, convinced that he is standing in the presence of a legendary hungry ghost. Reeling back, the guest lets out a blood-curdling scream, alerting everyone in the inn that a demon from hell has manifested among them. Unfazed by the commotion, So-hyun continued to tear into the food with his bare hands. Suddenly, he pushes himself away from the table, his tall frame casting a long, ominous shadow across the dimly lit room. The feral light in his eyes begins to fade, replaced by a cold, hollow clarity as he stares blankly into the distance. Without a word, he turns and begins to walk away, his movements fluid and eerily calm after his recent explosion of violence. The other patrons of the inn can only watch in stunned silence, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and utter confusion. So-hyun stops before the trembling innkeeper, his voice chillingly normal as he asks for the total cost of his meal. The Luyang innkeeper, a stocky man with a bandaged forehead, can barely find the breath to stammer out a response. A dark, predatory grin curls on So-hyun's lips as he drops a heavy pouch of coins onto the counter, claiming it should more than cover the bill. As he steps out into the night, the innkeeper and the guest whisper in hushed, fearful tones about the stranger who left his feast untouched, convinced the dark rumors are true. Standing atop a nearby roof under the cold glow of the full moon, So-hyun is once again enveloped in a swirling aura of purple energy. He stares down at his hands, haunted by the realization that no amount of physical food can ever fill the void created by his demonic art. He shakes his head slowly, the weight of his transformation pressing down on him as he contemplates his descent into something less than human. His thoughts are abruptly cut short by a faint metallic scent drifting through the night air, catching his attention. His eyes instantly transform, turning into pitch-black voids with glowing pupils as a truly monstrous smile stretches across his face. Caught in the throes of a new, even more powerful hunger, he declares that the scent is delicious beyond compare. He launches himself across the city, his silhouette a blur of dark energy as he hunts down the source of the irresistible aroma. In a dark alleyway below, a man is violently thrown to the pavement, the sound of his impact echoing off the stone walls. Members of the Black Bone gang loom over their victim, their leader mockingly asking if the man thought their organization was a joke. The victim, an extorted old man with a gray goatee and a face covered in blood, spits out a defiant curse at his blood-sucking extortionists. One of the thugs silences him with a brutal stomp to the hand, the sound of cracking bone punctuated by a sharp command for the old man to shut up. The Black Bone gang leader decides he's done playing around and just wants to take the old man's identification tag. He snatches it away while the extorted old man lies there on the ground, beaten and bloody. Holding the tag, the leader laughs, bragging about how this little piece of wood is enough to sell off the old man's shop and even his family. The old man can barely move, but he begs them to take him instead and leave his family out of it. The gang doesn't care. They keep kicking him while he's down, mocking him for not paying them back on time. The leader leans in with a twisted grin, talking about how much he could get for the man's kids. Suddenly, a high-pitched whistle cuts through the air. The scarred gang member and the leader freeze, looking around to see who's interrupting them. The spiritual pressure from the sound is so intense that the lackeys start clutching their heads in pain, while the leader demands the intruder show themselves. It's too much for the underlings. They're pinned to the ground by the sheer force of it. The leader realizes he's dealing with a serious master, someone who can mess with their spirits just by whistling. He quickly changes his tune, putting his hands together in a respectful gesture and asking if this esteemed expert has a problem with them. The three of them stand there, waiting in the silence as the air feels heavy. The leader gulps, sweat dripping down his neck as the tension builds. Shaking now, he practically begs for the person to step into the light and show themselves. A single foot in white robes steps forward from the shadows. Yoon So-hyun emerges, surrounded by a dark, swirling aura that makes him look like a demon in human skin. He walks closer with a cold smirk, and the leader looks like he's about to faint from terror. So-hyun's eyes glow purple as he reveals a mouth full of sharp teeth, telling them he just followed a delicious scent right to this alley. The leader's eyes nearly pop out of his head when he sees the monster standing in front of him. He tries to draw his sword in a blind panic, screaming for the demon to die. But So-hyun is already right there, closing the distance before the guy can even finish his sentence. He slams a hand into the leader's chest, and blood sprays everywhere as the guy's defense is shattered. A horrific scream echoes through the alley as the leader's arm is ripped clean off. The scarred gang member and his buddy are paralyzed, watching their boss get dismantled in seconds. So-hyun grabs the leader by the face, and shadowy hands start erupting from his aura to finish the job. He licks the blood off his lips, calling the taste delicious. The leader is gone, and So-hyun stands there covered in blood, looking like a true predator. The shadowy hands aren't done yet, reaching out for the rest of the gang as they try to bolt. They're like tentacles of pure darkness, grabbing anything in their path. One guy gets completely smothered by the dark mass, unable to even let out a final cry. A dark void of energy pulses on the ground where the bodies once were. So-hyun looks over his shoulder, a terrifying grin on his face as he notes there are still two left to play with. The scarred gang member loses it and starts sprinting away, screaming at the top of his lungs about a monster. He and the other survivor are running for their lives, not even looking back. But they can't outrun the darkness. A demonic face is literally hovering right behind them. The scarred man is drenched in sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs as he realizes he's being hunted. He slams a bloody hand against a gate, trying to find a way out of the dead-end alley. He stares into the darkness, blood dripping from his nose, convinced this has to be some kind of nightmare. He tries to scramble away on all fours, but a blood-stained hand reaches out for him from the shadows. Above them, the moon turns a deep crimson red as the darkness closes in. The alley is filled with his final, desperate scream as So-hyun claims his next course. The scarred gang member pounds on the wooden gate, screaming for anyone to help him, but the alley remains deathly silent. He looks back in pure terror, wondering why a monster like this is targeting them when the world is full of bad guys. Yoon So-hyun looms over him, his body wreathed in dark purple energy and his eyes glowing with an inhuman light. As the scarred man cowers, So-hyun leans in with a shark-like grin, telling him that he's only the beginning of the feast. A massive, demonic silhouette fills the frame as the ruler of darkness finally claims his prey, leaving nothing but blood and screams behind. Yoon So-hyun wakes up sprawled out on a cold, jagged floor. He's completely disoriented, with no clue how he got here. A sharp headache hits him as he tries to remember leaving the inn. He looks around, taking in the dark stone walls of the cavern. The path ahead is lined with rows of ancient stone coffins. It's clear now, he's ended up in some kind of underground tomb. Suddenly, a skeletal apparition with glowing red eyes lunges at his face. He doesn't even flinch, just notes how lifelike the corpses in the coffins look. A voice calls out from the dark, commending his unusual lack of fear. The old immortal materializes, draped in a tattered hood. So-hyun isn't impressed, telling the guy his voice sounds like moldy garbage. The entity just laughs, finding the blunt description pretty accurate. So-hyun keeps going, roasting the old man for his rotten teeth and terrible hygiene. The immortal grins. He's starting to really like this new contractor. He claims the scripture of the dark heavens tremor has finally found its proper match. He admits he's never encountered someone as bold as this kid. The old man asks how much So-hyun actually knows about the scripture he carries. So-hyun understands it's a demonic artifact powerful enough to send him back in time. It's a scripture woven from the flesh and blood of 3 immortals who defied heaven. But beyond that, he admits he's still pretty much in the dark about its true nature. He bows his head and asks the old immortal to teach him the truth. The immortal's single red eye flares with interest. He explains that most contractors usually react with either arrogance or insanity. They either think they're invincible or lose their minds before a conversation can even start. But So-hyun is different from all the failures who came before him. So-hyun notices the guy just switched from calling him a bastard to a more respectful tone. The old man confesses that even he doesn't fully understand the scripture's power. Its origins are murky, born from the self-destructive rage of ancient immortals. He reveals he was once an immortal himself before falling to this state. Now he's nothing more than a ghost of his former self, less than dust. So-hyun listens as the man explains he spent eons investigating the artifact. For every answer he found, 2 more questions popped up to take its place. He couldn't stop his research, yet the ultimate truth still eludes him. So-hyun realizes that if this guy has no answers, nobody does. The old immortal warns that countless legendary figures have tried and failed to master this thing. In the end, they were all consumed by the very power they sought. But in So-hyun, he sees a glimmer of hope that hasn't existed for centuries. He claims So-hyun has already passed the initiation rite and begun his journey. Then he asks a chilling question: "Did you not consume them?" So-hyun stares back, the weight of the question hanging in the air. A flash of his darker self appears, drenched in the blood of his victims. He stands surrounded by shadows, a true predator born from the void. The more evil So-hyun consumes, the more he'll unlock the true power of the dark heaven's tremor. He realizes that the insatiable hunger that's been driving him has finally vanished. It was a repulsive act that defied nature, yet it brought him a strange sense of satisfaction. The old immortal explains this is the first and final demand the scripture makes of its contractor. It's a scripture meant to devour all the darkness of the world in place of an indifferent heaven. Consuming isn't just a physical act. The hands that did it belong to the scripture's hungry ghosts. These ghosts manifest within his demonic domain to assist him with every meal. With a final rumbling sound, the visions of that dark realm begin to dissolve. The old immortal warns that their time for talking is running out for today. He bids So-hyun a happy hunting, promising they'll meet again very soon. The jagged walls of the tomb crumble and fade away into nothingness. The scene shifts back to the serene, towering architecture of the Luyang Sword clan's estate. Young-ah stands at the door, announcing that she's prepared tea and some light refreshments. Without looking up, So-hyun just tells her to leave them over by the table. Young-ah has realized a few things since arriving at the demonic human building. First, the place is filled with priceless martial arts manuals that she shouldn't even be looking at. Second, the first young master is a complete eccentric who ignores every social formality. He harvests his own vegetables and helps in the kitchen, which is unheard of for a noble. Even though their statuses are worlds apart, he acts like sharing a table is perfectly normal. She asks with some hesitation if he really expects her to eat with him again today. He gives her a slight smile and says it's not just for today, it's how things will be from now on. She tries to protest, saying she can't possibly eat before her master finishes his meal. And third, he doesn't seem to have even a single drop of romantic interest in her. It's truly confusing, as most men in the clan have much darker intentions when they look at her. Young-ah is known as the Ice Flower, and her beauty draws unwanted eyes from everyone. The second and third young masters, both vying for leadership, were no exception to this rule. Women claimed by those 2 brothers always ended up vanishing without a single trace. Young-ah lived in constant fear, making So-hyun's indifference a matter of survival for her. She followed the head steward's advice, but she still wonders if fleeing here was the right choice. Suddenly, the gatekeeper Guak barges in, looking flustered and out of breath. Young-ah is shocked by his insolence, snapping at him for interrupting the master's meal. Guak ignores her, frantically reporting that they have an unexpected visitor at the gates. He explains that the 3 severance warriors from the demonic human house have arrived. Young-ah's eyes widen in terror. Those are the 3rd young master's personal elite guards. Guak adds that they've come with a direct demand: hand over the maid who arrived yesterday. It's finally come to this. The rivalry between the brothers is starting to boil over into open conflict. Young-ah stands her ground, questioning how they dare summon her so insolently. Guak sighs, explaining he couldn't turn them away because they carry official orders. So-hyun slams his hand on the table, instantly silencing the frantic back and forth. He looks up from his book, surprising Young-ah with his sudden, quiet intensity. He tells her it's too noisy and orders her to just go find out what they want. She hesitates for a moment before bowing, realizing the 3rd young master is ignoring all protocol. Young-ah bows low to her master, promising to return as soon as she's dealt with the intrusion. So-hyun doesn't even look up from his book, but he isn't finished with the messenger yet. Messenger Guak is caught off guard as So-hyun calls out to him, his voice carrying a new, chilling authority that stops the man in his tracks. Guak points a finger at himself, sweating profusely as he stammers out a question. So-hyun stands before the trembling messenger, his presence filling the room. He asks Guak who gave him permission to simply barge into his private residence as he pleased. Guak tries to offer a weak excuse, explaining that there was no guard stationed at the demonic human gate following the incident from the previous day. So-hyun's expression remains unreadable, but his silence is more terrifying than any shout. So-hyun challenges him, asking if the absence of a guard means anyone can just walk in and out at their leisure. Guak immediately denies it, his fear growing as he realizes he's in serious trouble. Guak drops to one knee, offering a formal apology and swearing that such an oversight will never happen again. He hopes that this display of humility will be enough to appease the 1st young master. So-hyun agrees to forgive him just this once, but there's a catch. He informs Guak that he's being reassigned. From now on, he is to serve as the permanent liaison at the demonic human gate. The news hits Guak like a physical blow. He gapes at So-hyun, unable to believe that he's being demoted to a mere gatekeeper, a position far below his former status. So-hyun makes it clear that Guak's access to the main residential area is now strictly forbidden. He delivers the order with a cold, detached air, as if he's merely moving a piece on a game board. He offers Guak a mocking smile, telling him that if he doesn't like the new arrangement, he's more than welcome to try barging in again. The implicit threat is clear. Any further insolence will be met with a far more permanent solution. Guak has no choice but to accept the demotion. He bows his head, gritting his teeth in frustration and humiliation as he realizes how quickly his fortunes have turned. So-hyun dismisses him with a final, sharp question, asking why he's still standing there. Guak quickly makes his exit, his head spinning as he tries to process his new, lowly position. Outside at the main gate, the tension is palpable. One of the 3 severance warriors, sent by the 3rd young master, stands with an air of arrogant impatience. He demands to know if this is how guests are treated at the demonic human building. Young-ah steps forward to greet the visitor, maintaining her composure despite his aggressive tone. She introduces herself, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the warrior's brashness. The warrior doesn't care for pleasantries. He orders Young-ah to lead him inside, stating that he has urgent business with her master. He expects her to obey without question, assuming his status gives him the right to enter as he pleases. Young-ah stands her ground, her golden eyes fixed on the warrior. She informs him that the 1st young master has not authorized his entry and that any business he has must be discussed right there at the gate. The warrior's face contorts with rage. He can't believe a mere maid would dare to deny him entry, and he begins to reach for his weapon, his eyes narrow with a dangerous light. He draws his sword in a blur of movement, screaming at Young-ah for having the audacity to provoke him. The air around him crackles with hostile energy as he prepares to strike down the girl who dared to defy him. Young-ah doesn't flinch, her expression hardening as she watches the warrior's violent outburst. Her eyes flash with a hidden strength, suggesting that she's more than just a simple servant. A sudden, powerful shockwave erupts as Gwak steps in to intercept the warrior's attack. The force of their meeting sends a cloud of dust and debris into the air. The two men clash, their weapons locking as they test each other's strength. The warrior is stunned by the sudden intervention, his momentum halted by Gwak's resolute defense. Gwak stands between the warrior and Jung-ah, his sword drawn and ready. He reminds the intruder that this is a highly restricted area, and that entry requires a level of security clearance he clearly doesn't possess. The Three Severance warrior is livid, his face flushed with anger as he demands to know who Gwak thinks he is. He's used to getting his way and isn't about to let a lowly gatekeeper stand in his path. Gwak levels his sword at the warrior, his eyes glowing with a menacing red light. He gives the man a final warning, his voice low and dangerous, making it clear that he's more than willing to use force to protect the estate. The warrior hesitates, caught off guard by the sheer intensity of Gwak's killing intent. He's faced many opponents, but there's something about this man's raw, unbridled fury that gives him pause. Gwak is already on edge from his demotion, and the warrior's arrogance is the final straw. He's tired of being looked down upon and seems almost eager for a reason to unleash his frustration on the intruders. The warrior realizes he's in a precarious position. He can sense that Gwak is truly dangerous and that a fight here could easily turn deadly. He decides to take a step back, his bravado momentarily deflated. He tries to save face, clearing his throat and claiming that his only business is with the girl. He's looking for a way to complete his mission without having to go through the terrifying gatekeeper standing in his way. The warrior turns his attention back to Jung-ah, telling her that she must come with him to see the third young master. He's trying to reassert his authority, but his tone is now more demanding than truly threatening. Jung-ah doesn't waver, her expression calm and resolute. She tells the warrior that her whereabouts are not for the third young master to decide, making it clear that she only answers to her current master. The warrior's anger flares up again. He finds it intolerable that a mere servant would talk back to him in such a way, and he struggles to keep his temper in check under the watchful eye of Gwak. He promises Jung-ah that he'll be watching to see if she can maintain her smug attitude when she's finally brought before the third young master. He's determined to break her spirit, one way or another. He turns to leave, tossing a final, disparaging remark over his shoulder. He claims that the third young master has no interest in second-hand things, a cruel and deliberate insult aimed at Jung-ah's current situation. The warrior brushes past an elderly man who has just arrived, his frustration evident in every step. He's finished with this encounter for now, but the threat he represents still hangs heavy in the air. The newcomer, a man in elaborate teal robes and a tall hat, watches the warrior depart with a thoughtful expression. He seems to be taking stock of the situation, his calm demeanor suggesting a position of some importance. He introduces himself as the Lake Garden steward, responsible for the affairs of the second young master. His arrival adds a new layer of complexity to the unfolding drama at the demonic human building. The steward wastes no time, ordering Jung-ah to lead him to her master at once. He speaks with an air of quiet authority, his tone less aggressive than the previous visitors but no less demanding. Jung-ah remains steadfast, repeating her message that the first young master is not currently receiving guests. She's becoming weary of the constant demands, but refuses to compromise her master's privacy. The steward asks if it's really true that So-hyun is refusing all visitors, his eyes narrowed as he tries to gauge the truth of her statement. He has a letter to deliver and isn't about to be turned away easily. Gwak steps forward to support Jung-ah, confirming that her words are indeed the master's orders. He suggests that the steward leave his letter with the maid and depart, offering a firm but respectful resolution to the standoff. The steward hands the letter to Jung-ah, his expression unreadable. He tells her to keep his visit in mind, his words carrying a subtle weight that hints at the larger power struggle happening within the clan. He leans in close to Jung-ah, his voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. He warns her that regardless of whatever schemes she might have, she is ultimately just a small player in the second young master's grand design. Jung-ah meets his gaze with a hard, defiant look, refusing to be intimidated by his cryptic threats. Messenger Guac watches the lake garden stewards retreating back, his voice tinged with uncertainty as he asks Yong-ah if the first young master actually ordered them to turn away all visitors. Yong-ah admits that while So-hyun didn't give a direct order, his attitude made his wishes clear. Guac stares after the steward, confessing that he doesn't have a single good feeling regarding the first young master's recent behavior. Guac looks at Yong-ah with a trace of fatherly concern, explaining that he's only sharing his misgivings because he can't ignore a girl the age of his daughter being put in such a precarious position. He points out that So-hyun could have dismissed the messengers with a single word himself. He asks Yong-ah directly, is she acting out of genuine loyalty to the first young master, or is she simply trying to protect her own skin? Yong-ah remains silent, her face a mask of internal conflict. She tells Guac she will head back now and ensures he remembers his duty at the gate while she goes to deliver the letter to her master. As she walks through the empty halls, Yong-ah's thoughts drift to her past. Since being sold to the Sword Clan, there have been many people she felt she owed a debt of gratitude toward. She realizes that she has never truly contemplated the meaning of loyalty before this moment. She used to think she was being faithful by repaying kindness, but now she sees it was just returning what she had received. She wonders if she has been treating the first young master with that same shallow sense of obligation. Yong-ah holds out the sealed letter from the second young master, presenting it to So-hyun in his private study. Without a moment's hesitation, So-hyun takes the letter and tosses it into the nearby brazier. Flames quickly consume the parchment. Yong-ah's eyes widen in sheer shock as she stammers out a question to her master, unable to comprehend why he would destroy a message from the second young master. So-hyun calmly returns to his book, his voice devoid of any concern. When Yong-ah frantically reminds him of who sent the letter, he simply replies that he heard her the first time. Yong-ah's face is pale with worry. She explains that the letter likely concerned her own whereabouts and future status within the clan. She looks at him with pleading eyes, asking if he is truly okay with not even reading the contents before burning them. So-hyun doesn't look up, stating coldly that if the message were truly important, the second young master would have come to deliver it himself. He catches her off guard with a sudden question, asking why she didn't just read the letter herself if she was so curious about its contents. Yong-ah is stunned by the suggestion. He repeats the question, his gaze finally meeting hers. He seems genuinely indifferent to the protocol she holds so dear. Yong-ah immediately protests, her eyes wide with fear and indignation. She asks how a lowly servant like herself could ever dare to perform such a disrespectful act as reading her master's mail. So-hyun's expression softens slightly, or perhaps it's just a flicker of boredom. He drops the subject, inviting her to join him for tea instead. He pours the tea into a small cup, the golden liquid steaming in the quiet room. Yong-ah asks for permission to sit with him, and he grants it with a simple yes. Yong-ah takes a tentative sip of the tea, the warmth spreading through her as she tries to regain her composure. They sit in a heavy silence, the only sound the soft clink of teacups. So-hyun remarks that the aroma is wonderful, seemingly content with the quiet moment. As she drinks, Yong-ah's mind continues to race. She wonders why he suggested she read the letter. Suddenly, a realization strikes her like a bolt of lightning. A memory surfaces of So-hyun waiting for her to eat first during their meals. She finally understands. It wasn't a lack of trust. The first young master only ever ate after he was certain she was safe and well-fed. Yong-ah's eyes widen as she makes a horrifying connection. She realizes the young master has been using her to test his food for poison. The realization hits hard. Every meal they shared wasn't about bonding. It was because he didn't trust her not to kill him. She covers her mouth, shaking as she thinks about how little she's valued in his eyes. She stands up, admitting that she's just another untrustworthy guest to him. Yoon So-hyun keeps his eyes on his book, barely acknowledging her outburst. Yong-ah apologizes for blocking his guests without asking first. She looks down, feeling like a fool for missing what truly mattered. She wonders if surviving for so long, without a real master, has ruined her judgment. The maid drops to her knees. She begs for a chance, pledging her absolute loyalty if he'll accept her. So-hyun stops reading to look her over. He asks if she can really stay loyal, no matter what dark secrets come to light. Without a second of hesitation, she vows that she can. He tests her immediately, asking what she knows about his father, the Grand Patriarch. The young master reveals the truth. His father was poisoned into a coma, and the clan is being run by a shadow council. He adds that they've tried to poison him too, which is why he's cooked for himself since childhood. Jung-ah is horrified by the dark reality of his life. He tells her this is just a fraction of the darkness here and asks if she still wants to serve him. She doesn't flinch, officially asking him to take her on as his subordinate. He hands her a letter, telling her to read the final page. The words are cold and heartless, ordering that she be worked like a beast or quietly eliminated. She grips the paper, staring at the order for her own execution. Tears fall as she realizes the man who wrote this was like a father to her. So-hyun calmly sips his tea, asking if she finally understands why he showed her the truth. She wipes her eyes, nodding. She says she finally understands what true loyalty looks like. So-hyun calls that kind of loyalty pure madness, the kind that makes a parent discard their own child. He asks one last time if she still wants to pledge herself to him. She looks up with absolute devotion, declaring him her one and only master. He gives her a satisfied smile, finally getting the answer he wanted. Night settles over the pavilion of original enlightenment. Inside, Jung-ah begins to tell the story of her family's merchant group. She shares a memory of her father and sister when things were still happy. A younger, carefree Jung-ah laughs in the sun. But it all fell apart when the business failed, and they took out a predatory loan called Yama's debt. It's a debt designed to trap you, forcing you to pay back 10 times what you borrowed. Her sister tried everything she could to save the family. But the debt was too high, and they were eventually sold off to different families. So-hyun finds it hard to believe someone so young could run a merchant group. Jung-ah explains that her sister was always a genius and is now a top information broker in Luoyang. So-hyun's eyes sharpen at the mention of an information broker. Jung-ah reveals that her sister just found the man responsible for their family's ruin. Jung-ah can't hide the bitterness in her voice as she mentions the name Jeom-jil, the man who destroyed her life. So-hyun sips his tea, repeating the name as if he's sizing up a future target. He clarifies that her sister is now an information merchant, which is a pretty handy connection to have. He decides right then and there that they're going to meet her tomorrow. Jung-ah's eyes light up with pure shock and joy. She can't believe he's actually serious. The young master gives her a rare, gentle smile and tells her she'll have half a day to catch up with her sister. A bit later, Jung-ah shows up ready to go, looking humble in her standard maid outfit. So-hyun looks her up and down with a critical eye, clearly unimpressed with her choice of attire. He tells her flat out that her current look falls way short of what a maid serving him should be wearing. He calls out for the gatekeeper, sounding like he's about to give an order that won't be popular. Messenger Guak stomps off, grumbling under his breath about being treated like a common doorman despite his rank. So-hyun doesn't care about his feelings and orders him to head to the inner house to fetch some high-end clothes for Jung-ah. Guak is fuming, his face contorting with rage at being used for such a trivial errand. So-hyun leans in with a threat. If he doesn't get moving, he'll be demoted from a gatekeeper to a literal waste carrier. That does the trick, and the scarred messenger sprints away like his life depends on it. The two of them watch him disappear into the distance in a cloud of dust. As he runs, Guak is cursing So-hyun's name, resenting how he's being mocked by someone he views as a shut-in. He tells himself he just needs to endure a little longer until his reassignment request finally goes through. But when he gets back, he's empty-handed and frustrated, saying the inner house stewards refuse to give him anything. Jung-ah tries to play it safe, suggesting they just leave since they're already running behind. So-hyun just hums to himself and reaches into his sleeve, remembering he has a little something for situations like this. Without warning, he slams a heavy golden block onto Guak's forehead, leaving a physical mark. Guak's eyes nearly pop out of his head when he realizes exactly what he's been branded with. So-hyun literally kicks him out the door, telling him to show the stewards that brand and see if they still want to play games. Young-ah is standing there with her jaw on the floor, barely able to process what just happened. He casually holds up the artifact, confirming it is indeed the official seal of the family head. She's stunned that he's even in possession of the golden seal of the Sword Clan. He just gives her a smug look, pointing out that since his father is out of commission, he's the only one who should have it. This isn't just any seal. It's a token of trust that was once bestowed on the clan by the emperor himself. It's a mystical artifact that carries the weight of absolute authority within the Luyang Sword Clan. Young-ah can't wrap her head around why he'd use something that's sacred just to get her a new dress. He shrugs it off, admitting he uses it for trivial stuff all the time, like buying books or pens, because people won't listen otherwise. She's completely flabbergasted by how casually he treats such a powerful object. Suddenly, Wu Hwa Yon, the female steward of the inner house, arrives with a whole entourage behind her. So Hyun doesn't even break a sweat, telling her that life would have been much simpler if her department had just cooperated from the start. The steward is clearly shaking with rage, but she has no choice but to bow and take her leave, knowing she's been thoroughly put in her place. Then the steward brought a dozen ingredients before Yon So-hyun, his maid Young-ah, and the gatekeeper Gwak, just like in a high-end silk shop. Looking at the expensive fabrics, Young-ah starts to get cold feet, worried this is way beyond her station. So-hyun tells her to get used to it. She's going to be wearing robes like this a lot from now on. She can only clasp her hands together, overwhelmed by the sudden change in her status. Now, Luyang has been the cultural and economic heart of the land for ages. It's a massive metropolis of millions, all thanks to the trade flowing through the Grand Canal. As they walk through the streets, some local guys can't help but notice the group. They're completely mesmerized by how beautiful Young-ah looks in her new finery. One of them warns the other to stop staring. She's with a guard from the Luyang Sword Clan. That guard is Messenger Gwak, and he's clearly not enjoying his new job as an escort. He's fuming, thinking about how he went from a respected messenger to a glorified errand boy. Suddenly, So-hyun announces he has some personal business to take care of, and tells Gwak he'll catch up later. Gwak is stunned, wondering if the master is seriously planning to just ditch his own guard. So-hyun doesn't blink. He just tells Gwak to stay behind and make sure Young-ah stays safe. And just like that, he's gone. Gwak is left staring at the empty space where his master just was. Frustrated, he tells Young-ah she'll have to manage on her own while he tries to track him down. Young-ah isn't worried at all, telling him she can look after herself just fine. Gwak takes off, realizing So-hyun is way faster than any normal noble should be. He starts leaping across the rooftops, desperately scanning the crowded streets below. But even with his internal power circulating, he can't find a single trace of the young master's presence. He's left sweating, wondering who the hell the first young master actually is. Meanwhile, So-hyun casually walks up to a secluded house in a quiet corner of the city. The door creaks open, revealing a dim interior. A voice calls out from the shadows, welcoming him back. A man looking pretty beat up himself invites So-hyun into his humble home. The place is a total wreck, with debris scattered all over the floor. The man is livid, cursing out the Black Bone gang for trashing the place while he was gone. He rushes deeper into the house, frantically calling out for his family. He finds his wife and kids huddled together and frantically asks if they're hurt. They all collapse into a hug, just relieved to see him alive. It's an emotional mess, and So-hyun just watches the reunion with his usual calm expression. The wife looks up and realizes there's a noble standing in their trashed home. She immediately drops to her knees, begging for mercy regarding their debts. She's terrified, pleading with him to at least spare her father's life so he can work to pay them back. Her husband quickly cuts in, telling her to calm down because this is the man who saved his life. She goes quiet, her fear slowly turning into confusion and relief. Realizing her mistake, she bows her head as low as it'll go in gratitude. Soon the whole family is bowing to the young master who saved their lives. The man offers him a seat and a simple cup of tea as a thanks. So-hyun decides he has a moment to spare and accepts the offer. The man pours the tea, apologizing that it's just cheap leaves that might offend his palate. So-hyun takes a quiet sip and tells him the aroma is actually quite lovely. The man So-hyun saved is still in shock, asking how he could ever possibly repay him for such a huge favor. He explains that the thugs weren't just random street toughs. They were muscle for the Black Bone Gang, led by a woman named Jeom-ju. Apparently, this syndicate is massive and has its claws in everything from gambling to loan sharking. So-hyun asks why a simple artisan would end up at a gambling den in the first place, and the man admits it's how they trap people. Since there are laws limiting interest rates, the gang forces people to gamble until their debt spirals out of control. So-hyun stays silent, remembering that he and his father were the ones who established those very laws. He asks if there's anything else the man knows about the gang's leaders, Jeom-ju or his daughter. The artisan shakes his head. Simple folks like them aren't privy to the inner workings of a massive syndicate. So-hyun accepts that, his expression remaining as unreadable as ever. He thanks the man for the tea and says it's time for him to head out. The man begs him to at least stay long enough to give them his name so they can properly repay the debt. His wife and kids join in, insisting that they can't let their savior leave with absolutely nothing. So-hyun's gaze shifts, spotting something interesting among the debris on the floor. A collection of discarded masks lies scattered across the broken floorboards. He walks over and picks up a plain white mask, telling them he'll take this and call it even. He announces that with this one item, all gratitude and grudges between them are officially settled. The man's face pales as he sees which mask So-hyun chose. He admits that he didn't even make that one himself. It's a crude, unfinished piece with no holes for the eyes or the nose. He explains it was the last thing his father worked on before he died, and word is, the object is cursed. So-hyun asks what could have possibly driven a dying man to create such a strange masterpiece. The man wonders what thoughts could even go through the mind of someone who had completely lost their sanity. So-hyun presses him, asking if something specific happened before his father finally broke. The artisan is surprised he knows so much, but admits the truth. His talented older brother was once the hope of the workshop. But then his brother was falsely accused of a crime and thrown into a government prison. Their father, a famous artisan, went to an inspector he knew to beg for his son's release. Instead of help, the inspector demanded a bribe so large they had to take a loan from the Black Bone Gang. Even after all that, all they got back was his brother's cold, lifeless body. The family was left to mourn their loss in the dirt, their lives completely shattered. It turned out the whole thing was because of a petty bet between high-ranking officials comparing their treasures. One of them had used the father's masterpiece to win, and the loser was absolutely livid. Since he couldn't touch the official, he targeted the artisan's family instead, framing the son who was supposed to inherit the shop. The father protested the injustice every day at the government office, only to be beaten by guards. To finish him off, the inspector had the old man's hands completely crushed so he could never carve again. He was carried home a broken shell of a man, his spirit as crushed as his bones. He never left his workshop again, refusing to see anyone until the day he passed away. So-hyun asks if the man still doesn't understand the true meaning behind this mask. The artisan drops to the floor, begging So-hyun to enlighten him on what his father was trying to say. It was only natural the mask looked so rough. It wasn't meant for beauty. The old man had gone completely mad, unkempt and starving himself in that workshop. Since his hands were useless, he spent his final days carving the wood with his own toes. He never stopped, even when his feet were covered in blood, fueled by a pure, agonizing rage at the world. The old man gasps his final breath, dying at the exact moment he completes his dark masterpiece. Born from a cocktail of pure blood and unadulterated hatred, a cursed object was officially brought into the world. The memory of his family before the tragedy flickers through the son's mind, a brief glimpse of a happiness long since buried. Now all that's left are ghosts, and the cold, hard reality of lives shattered by the greed of the powerful. So Hyun realizes that his arrival here wasn't just a coincidence, but the pull of a restless, vengeful spirit. He stands in the dimly lit workshop, the white mask in his hand feeling heavier than simple wood should. He looks down at the weeping family, their lives ground into the dirt by the very same filth he aims to purge. Seeing the depth of their sorrow, he finally understands why the old artisan left the mask eyeless. It wasn't that the old man lacked the skill or the strength to carve out the eyes with his toes. It was a conscious choice, a final, silent refusal to look upon such a hideous and unjust world. So Hyun slowly fits the mask onto his face, declaring that he, too, cannot bear to look upon this world with open eyes. The scene shifts to a hidden corner of Luoyang, where the atmosphere is thick with a different kind of darkness. A needle repeatedly pierces skin as a tattoo artist adds another macabre trophy to a massive, muscled arm. Jill, the gang leader, remains impassive as the artist notes he's clearly taken another life recently. The artist is ready to continue, but Jill's sharp instincts tell him they are no longer alone. He orders the man to leave the room immediately, having sensed an unwelcome presence nearby. A split second later, the ceiling caves in as a group of masked assassins drops down to surround him. The killers surround the massive man, foolishly believing they have him cornered and vulnerable. Instead of alarm, a sadistic grin spreads across Jill's face. He's been craving a bit of excitement. One of the attackers lunges forward with a sword, aiming a killing stroke at the gang leader's head. Jill doesn't even move to dodge, his eyes burning with a savage, predatory intensity as he prepares to counter. With a single, thunderous punch, he catches the assassin square in the jaw, sending him flying. The other assassins hesitate, realizing too late that they are dealing with a monster, not a man. Jill moves with terrifying speed, a blur of muscle and malice that tears through their ranks. He catches a blade with his bare hands, the wood around them splintering under the sheer force of his presence. With a feral roar, he unleashes his full power, intent on turning these bugs into nothing more than red smears. The struggle is brief and brutal, leaving the room filled with the smell of blood and the sound of heavy breathing. Jill stands tall in the center of the carnage, his body radiating a palpable, blood-red aura. He continues his rampage, systematically crushing every intruder until the floor is littered with their remains. The entire room is now a tomb of broken bone and shattered wood, with Jill standing over the dead. He laughs mockingly, telling the corpses that while they can hide their intent, they could never hide their incompetence. He turns back to the trembling artist, casually demanding 4 more skull tattoos to mark today's work. His brother walks into the room, seemingly unimpressed by the slaughter and congratulating him on the job. Jill looks over, mentioning he heard some very strange rumors from his boys while the other was away. His expression turns serious as he prepares to relay news that has clearly piqued his curiosity. He brings up the silk merchant's shop, the one they had supposed to have completely shut down and seized. Apparently, the shop is currently open and operating perfectly fine, which shouldn't be possible. The brother adds that the person running it is said to be some kind of pale scholar. Jill's eyes narrow at the mention of a scholar having the gall to defy his authority. He wonders who could possibly be suicidal enough to reopen a shop that was seized by him personally. Determined to put an end to this defiance, the two brothers make their way through the streets of Luoyang. They arrive at the shop's entrance, ready to brutally correct whoever has dared to challenge the Black Bone Gang. Jill and his brother stride into the workshop, spotting a solitary figure seated at a desk in the distance. The brother notes that the scholar is far younger than he imagined, wondering if the boy is merely a disciple of the previous owner. Unfazed by their intrusion, So-hyun continues to meticulously carve a wooden Buddha statue, his movements steady and calm. Impatient and arrogant, Jill leads the way forward, deciding to get answers through intimidation. With a predatory sneer, Jill demands to know the whereabouts of the old artisan who used to run the shop. So-hyun finally looks up, his face hidden behind the unsettling, eyeless white mask he recently donned. Jill feels a sudden, inexplicable chill, annoyed that a simple wooden mask could actually startle him for a moment. He quickly masks his discomfort with bravado, looming over the seated youth and demanding respect. The blank white surface of the mask offers no hint of So-hyun's emotions, reflecting only the gang leader's cruel face. So-hyun rests his hand atop the head of the small statue, as if drawing some sort of silent strength from the wood. A sinister purple glow ignites behind the mask's eye slits, as So-hyun asks if they have ever seen the true face of Avalokitesvara. The two brothers exchange confused glances, dismissing the boy's cryptic words as the nonsensical ramblings of a lunatic. So-hyun stands, sighing as he concludes that attempting to discuss enlightenment with such beasts is a futile endeavor. Clad in pristine white robes and wearing the haunting mask, he walked into the house. Insulted by his tone, the brother suggests they simply beat the boy until he stops speaking in riddles. Jill scoffs, confident that someone as fragile-looking as So-hyun won't even survive a single blow from his massive fists. He pauses for a moment, his eyes scanning the shelves of masks that seem to be watching his every move. It makes no sense. His men were supposed to have completely ransacked this place and left it in ruins. Every mask on display is perfectly intact and dust-free, leading Jill to suspect some form of foul play or sorcery. Driven by a mixture of anger and unease, Jill kicks open the door to the back room where So-hyun has retreated. He is met with a chilling, high-pitched cackle that echoes through a room suddenly filled with a thick, swirling purple mist. To his horror, dozens of skeletal, translucent hands begin to claw their way up from the floorboards, grasping at his legs. The fearless gang leader's face pales as he realizes that the scholar he planned to crush is something far more dangerous. Before he can even draw a breath to scream, a massive, clawed hand of pure shadow lunges from the darkness to claim him. Jill is being dragged straight to hell. Shadowy hands sprout from the floorboards, wrapping around his throat and pulling him down. He gasps for air, his eyes wide as he realizes he's completely trapped by the darkness. Another mass of shadows shoots across the room, targeting his brother. Jill's brother screams in terror as the shadows begin to pull him into the abyss below. Jill's confidence vanishes, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. Something cold grabs his boot, hauling him backward into the void. He kicks desperately, but the floor has turned into a supernatural trap that won't let go. He lets out one last scream as he's dragged deeper into the floor. His fingernails claw at the wood, leaving deep gashes in a final, useless attempt to stay above. The man who once ruled with terror is now reduced to begging for his life. His pleas are drowned out by the sound of something monstrous rising from the depths. Spirits with glowing red eyes and jagged teeth emerge from the purple mist, hungrily watching their prey. Every mask in the shop seems to be laughing as it witnesses the final moments of the thugs. One of the painted faces glows with an eerie light, marking the end of the massacre. Meanwhile, So-hyun is miles away, sitting peacefully in a quiet forest clearing. He focuses on carving a piece of wood, the sound of his blade the only thing breaking the silence. He wonders what the true face of a Buddha actually looks like. With a final stroke, he declares the carving complete. He gently sets the small, eyeless statue onto a stone base. He stands before a grave mound covered in masks, telling the deceased artisan to finally rest in peace. He thinks of the Black Bone Gang and men like Jill, who do nothing but mock and despise. A dark smirk crosses his face as he notes that their pathetic ridicule will be the only resistance they can offer. Across the city, the Crescent Moon Pavilion looms over the bustling streets of Luoyang. Inside, Young-ah meets with her older sister, Si-ah, a cunning information merchant who runs the pavilion. Si-ah explains that while the potential successors are fighting for power, the patriarch is nowhere to be found. Even old rumors of poisoning within the Luoyang sword clan are starting to resurface. Young-ah dismisses the talk as complete nonsense, maintaining her composure. Her sister just laughs, suggesting that she clearly hasn't earned the first young master's trust yet. Young-ah ignores the jab, taking a slow sip of her tea. She calls out the blatant provocation, knowing her sister is just digging for secrets. Si-ah shifts the blame, claiming the first young master is the reason the clan has fallen into such chaos. A small vein pops on Young-ah's forehead as her polite smile turns strained. Ah continues her taunts, asking if So-hyun is just incapable of taking the lead. Young-ah's eyes sharpen into a glare that could kill. Ah admits she was shocked to hear Young-ah had moved to So-hyun's pavilion. She mentions how the news caught all the other aides off guard. She toys with her tobacco pipe, trying to guess what her sister is actually planning. She can't fathom why anyone would choose to align themselves with the swordless one. Young-ah's voice turns ice cold as she orders her sister never to use that title again. Taken aback by the sudden intensity, Ah quickly backtracks with an apology. She acknowledges that So-hyun is no ordinary man, especially in her line of work. Still, she notes it's been 10 long years since the Grand Patriarch went into seclusion. Ah notes that while the Patriarch was away, rivals built up massive factions. She wonders if the first young master stands any chance of surviving the coming storm. Young-ah suddenly freezes, her eyes locking onto something outside the frame. A massive crash shakes the building, nearly knocking them both over. The windows explode inward as thugs from the Black Bone Gang storm the pavilion. Their leader orders his men to snatch the master of the Crescent Moon Pavilion immediately. The sisters are caught off guard by the sheer boldness of the attack. Young-ah can't believe it. Attacking a neutral guild in broad daylight is basically a suicide mission. The thugs sneer, telling Ah she's even prettier than the rumors said as they close in. Young-ah screams for her sister as the intruders lung for her. Meanwhile, in a busy part of Luoyang, the street food stalls are packed with people. Messenger Guak finally finds So-hyun and looks like he's about to have a heart attack. So-hyun just looks at him, asking if the guard is really shouting at him in public. Guak sputters that he was worried sick since the maid was wandering around alone. The young master just gives a faint smile, asking if she's actually in any danger. He keeps eating, his total lack of concern only making the guard more anxious. He smiles to himself, looking like he knows a secret the rest of the world hasn't figured out yet. Back at the pavilion, Young-ah grabs her sister's long tobacco pipe from the table. She swings the pipe like a staff, her movements sharp and focused. The makeshift weapon slams into a thug's face, sending him crashing backward. Another attacker hits the deck, unable to keep up with the girl's speed. The thugs are stunned, wondering what kind of fighter they've stumbled upon. Young-ah stands her ground, her golden eyes beginning to glow with an intense light. The gang leader laughs it off, warning the young lady that acting tough without martial arts is a bad idea. Ah watches from the side, sweating as she wonders what her sister is thinking. She knows that regardless of training, there's a limit to what a non-martial artist can do. She cries out in concern, but Young-ah doesn't move an inch. Young-ah grips the pipe with both hands, ready for the next wave. Ah warns her she can only hold them off for 15 minutes before the security kicks in. The leader sneers, telling her she's had enough warnings before giving the order to attack. He and his men charge forward, certain this will be an easy win. A huge fist flies straight at Young-ah's head. But everything slows down for Young-ah as her golden eyes fully activate, tracking every breath and muscle twitch. She can feel their movements before they even happen, seeing through every opening. She ducks the punch with ease, catching the lead thug completely by surprise. She follows up with a lightning-fast strike, sending the man stumbling back. The leader screams at his men to stop playing around and go all out. Young-ah is a blur of motion, weaving through the thugs and landing precise blows. Another thug takes a hit to the ribs and goes down hard. Ah is left speechless, staring at her sister in absolute shock. She can't believe a non-martial artist is dismantling the Black Bone Gang's elite so easily. The leader grits his teeth, his face twisting in rage as his men get picked apart. The leader of the Black Bone Gang lunges at Young-ah, roaring that she won't learn her lesson until she's bleeding. Young-ah's golden eye narrows as she tracks his movements with perfect clarity, her focus absolute. She swings her sister's long pipe with a sharp whistle, the metal cutting through the air. The weapon slams into the leader's face, the impact sending him crashing into his own men. Without missing a beat, she delivers a finishing blow to another thug, the pipe connecting with a dull thud. Young-ah stands victorious over the pile of defeated gang members, her expression calm and composed. Young-ah's sister is stunned, asking if she learned sword arts at the Sword Clan, but Young-ah simply says she picked it up by watching. The older sister can only stare in disbelief, unable to process how Young-ah could be this skilled without formal training. A heavy silence falls over the room, broken only by the groans of the unconscious elite fighters. A pair of elegant heels clicks on the floor as a cold, feminine voice asks what the meaning of this mess is. Young-ah's eyes widen as she recognizes the voice, her posture immediately tensing up. A blonde woman in a red rose-patterned dress steps into the room, calling her elite men pathetic for being defeated. She smirks at the sisters, crossing her arms as she mocks the pavilion's poor treatment of its guests. Ju barges in with her thugs like she owns the place, telling everyone to get lost. The pavilion master demands to know what she's doing, reminding her that there will be consequences for a stunt like this. Ju just complains about the service, acting offended that nobody's offered her a cup of tea yet. When the pavilion master scoffs at the idea of her being a guest, Ju just smiles and insults her intelligence. She asks if the pavilion master really thinks she'd still be standing there in one piece if they were actually enemies. The scarred monk thug behind her doesn't wait for an answer. He makes his move. He strikes with a high-speed claw attack, aimed right for her face. The pavilion master is fast, though leaning back just enough to avoid the worst of it. She doesn't even move an inch more than necessary, despite the fresh cut on her cheek. Ju acts impressed, wishing her own men had even half that much spine. She starts walking around the room, mentioning how her men have been getting ambushed lately. She shrugs it off as the cost of doing business, but her tone is anything but casual. Ju sits down and looks the master in the eye, accusing her of being the one behind the attacks. She asks if the pavilion master finds it suspicious that Ju showed up right when their guard was down. Ju is practically glowing as she brags about her new source of high-grade intel. She's done dealing with amateurs, and she's about to show them why. She reaches into her sleeve to pull out something she's been dying to show off. She claims her new partners are the strongest power in the entire Central Plains. Young-ah goes pale the moment she sees the bronze medallion. It belongs to the Sword Clan. Ju is loving the reaction, asking if they finally recognize who they're dealing with. Young-ah stays quiet, her face tense as she realizes the gravity of the situation. Ju laughs, feeling completely untouchable now that she's backed by the clan, until a voice interrupts from the side. Yoon So-hyun just casually leans against the doorframe and asks if he can take a look at the medal. The ladies are stunned to see him, especially Young-ah, who can't believe her master just showed up. So-hyun steps inside with a smug grin, acting like he's just dropping by for a visit. Namgung, from now on, refer to him as Namgung instead of Gwak, is right behind him, though he looks like he's about to have an aneurysm over So-hyun's decision to climb the walls instead of using the gate. So-hyun just shrugs it off, saying climbing looks way cooler anyway. He holds out a hand and tells Ju to hand the medallion over. Ju can't believe her ears. She looks at the medallion, then back at this kid who's making demands. The scarred monk thug is already losing his patience, demanding to know who this scrawny kid is. So-hyun gestures to Namgung's uniform, asking if they can't tell what clan they represent. The thugs start laughing, mocking the idea of being scared of a lowly guard from the Sword Clan. Namgung is clearly not in the mood for jokes, his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the target. So-hyun warns them that while he might look like an ordinary guard, he's actually a master-level warrior. The big guy just laughs in his face, claiming that if Namgung is a master, then he must be the best in the world. So-hyun just closes his eyes and sighs, deciding it's time to stop talking and just orders Namgung to fetch it. Namgung acknowledges the command, his eyes suddenly glowing a terrifying shade of red. He takes one deliberate step forward, and the sound of his boot hitting the floor echoes through the room. The thugs suddenly stop laughing, feeling a massive wave of pressure hitting them all at once. 2 steps, and the atmosphere in the room gets so heavy it's hard to even breathe. The thugs are actually shaking now, realize they might have just picked a fight with the wrong people. 3 steps. Namgung isn't just walking anymore, he's closing in like a predator. Jiamju's eyes widen as she realizes Namgung isn't just posturing. Before she can even blink, Namgung lunges forward like a blur of dark energy. His foot slams into the floor with enough force to shake the whole room. He hands the medallion over to So-hyun, showing everyone just how outmatched they really are. Jiamju is left frozen, her hand still tingling from the speed of the snatch. So-hyun takes the prize and starts examining it with a bored look on his face. He confirms that it's the authentic article, much to Young-ah's concern. He notes that this medallion represents a blood debt of gratitude from the Sword Clan. He explains how clan members would traditionally die for whoever holds a piece like this. The pavilion master listens intently, her expression unreadable behind her eye patch. So-hyun tosses the medallion back, calling it a cheapened token handed out to business partners these days. Jiamju catches it with a smug grin, claiming it's still a perfect guarantee of her safety. So-hyun admits that ignoring the token would hurt the clan's reputation, no matter how much it's been degraded. Jiamju smirks, finally putting 2 and 2 together and realizing she's talking to the infamous Swordless One. So-hyun's gaze is sharp, but he doesn't rise to the bait of the name. Jiamju bursts out laughing, mocking him for almost making her lose her cool. She scoffs at his reputation, hearing that he was too busy wasting his life to care about the clan. She asks if he's here to drag the family name through the mud even further. Young-ah's pipe slams onto the table in a flash of anger. With the medallion now in Namgung's hands, he growled and told Jiamju to shut her mouth. The pavilion master chimes in, reminding Jiamju that she's still a member of the Sword Clan. Jiamju just turns around and asks if this sheltered little boy looks like he belongs in a clan of warriors. She brags about her connection to the second young master, calling him the only true successor. She pauses, her eyes narrowing as she looks at the maid. Jiamju studies Young-ah for a second, her smile turning predatory. She points a finger, recognizing Young-ah as the troublesome girl her source mentioned. Young-ah is visibly shaken, her loyalty to her master clashing with the insults. Jiamju laughs at the coincidence of them being in the same room. She asks why Young-ah would throw away a chance with the second young master for a failure like So-hyun. Young-ah's blood is boiling as she tells her to stop insulting him. She declares that So-hyun is a noble person that Jiamju isn't even worthy to talk about. Jiamju mocks her definition of noble, listing all of So-hyun's supposed failures. Young-ah's resolve starts to waver as the verbal assault continues. Throughout the entire province, the name Swordless One is nothing but a joke. While his father worked himself to death for the clan, So-hyun was nowhere to be found. Jiamju leans in close, enjoying the way Young-ah has gone silent. Young-ah is overcome with frustration and humiliation, unable to fight back with words. She knows her master isn't what they say, but nothing she says seems to matter. A sudden wave of dizziness washes over her as her strength fails. So-hyun places a calming hand on her shoulder and tells her that's enough. He looks Jiamju in the eye, warning her that he'll actually get angry if she keeps pushing. Jiamju just smirks and decides to head out, saying the whole thing was getting boring anyway. The pavilion master glares with barely contained fury as Jiamju makes her exit. Jiamju leaves with a parting threat, warning that next time, the pathetic first young master won't be able to save anyone. The pavilion master watches her go, her expression cold and resolute. Jiamju waves a mock goodbye, telling them all to take care until their next encounter. The pavilion master and Young-ah are left standing in the wake of the insults, the air thick with tension. Suddenly, the toll of the day becomes too much for Young-ah, and she collapses to her knees with a weak apology. The pavilion master catches her, calling out in alarm as Young-ah loses consciousness. She desperately tries to wake the girl, her voice full of genuine concern. Later, So-hyun and Namgung stand by Young-ah's bedside, the mood somber as she rests. Namgung's fists clench as he seethes over the pups who dared to tarnish the Sword Clan's name. He wishes So-hyun had the power his status demands, his hands trembling with suppressed rage. He claims he would have reclaimed the medallion and punished them all for their insolence. So-hyun looks on with a calm, analytical gaze, unfazed by the guard's outburst. He tells Namgung it's best to return now, noting that whoever handed over that medallion might mistake the guard's benevolence for his own. Namgung is taken aback, insisting that his primary duty is to guard the first young master. So-hyun bluntly tells him there's no need to sacrifice himself for someone he hasn't dedicated his sword to. Namgung bows his head, looking ashamed and conflicted as he offers another apology. So-hyun hands him a document, making it an official order to return after his temporary duty. He tells the man to take the order and leave, his tone final and brook no argument. Namgung accepts the order with a heavy heart, his hand tightening around the paper. As he walks away, he can't help but feel a profound sense of helplessness and misery. The sound of his footsteps echoes down the hallway, matching the rhythm of his dark thoughts. Inside the room, the pavilion master asks So-hyun if he's sure Young-ah will be all right. He assures her that the girl is simply sleeping, but the pavilion master still seems skeptical. She questions why his pulse examination was taking so long if it was just a simple matter of sleep. So-hyun ignores the question, asking instead if she's brought the information on the Black Bone Gang. The pavilion master pulls out a stack of papers, still concerned about Young-ah's true condition. So-hyun reveals that the examination showed Young-ah is actually suffering from a serious illness. The pavilion master reacts with concern, asking what kind of illness it is. He dryly remarks that overwork is a serious illness that can take even the young without warning. The pavilion master watches Young-ah sleep, realizing that So-hyun is just trying to downplay the situation. She notes that based on the info he's gathered, he's clearly planning something dangerous against the Black Bone Gang. So-hyun tells her bluntly that it doesn't concern her, his eyes cold and focused. The pavilion master's gaze sharpens, reminding him that she isn't his subordinate and doesn't follow his orders. She warns him that the bronze medallion Jeom-ju held was the real deal, a serious problem. She points out that Jeom-ju's connections and the Sword Clan's intelligence network are things he should understand well. Frustrated, she asks how he could just stand by and watch all of this happen if he knew the risks. So-hyun suggests they step outside to talk so the patient can rest in peace. Under the light of the full moon, they continue their conversation in the courtyard. The pavilion master asks him directly who the greatest martial family in the world is. He answers without hesitation, the Sword Clan. She explodes in anger, asking why that same clan would give its medallion to an unorthodox group like the Black Bone Gang. So-hyun explains how groups like the Black Bone Gang have been thriving by exploiting the people of Luoyang. He points out that the noble houses didn't just watch, they were actively using these gangs for their own ends. The pavilion master turns back, her face contorted with anger as she asks why he has remained idle if he knew about this corruption. She admits that while Jeom-ju was insulting, she wasn't wrong about So-hyun's lack of action. She glares at him, accusing him of hiding behind his seclusion order instead of using his legendary talent to help. She begins to walk away, warning him not to lecture her while she is the one risking her life to make a difference. So-hyun's voice stops her in her tracks as he warns her not to provoke Jeom-ju any further. He begins a story, speaking of two sisters from the past who shared a deep bond. As he walks, he describes how the older sister was driven by a sense of justice that she could not abandon. His gaze is distant as he recounts how the sister and her comrades were eventually slaughtered after their righteous strike failed. The memory shifts to the younger sister, whose grief over her sibling's death drove her to the brink of madness. In a flurry of blood and blades, the younger sister sought vengeance, only to be branded a public enemy and hunted like a beast. So-hyun notes that while this story is a relic of the past, it serves as a grim omen for the future. The pavilion master listens, her confusion growing at the strange and haunting tale. He looks up at the moon, lamenting that neither their names nor their noble intentions were ever honored by history. Instead, they were remembered only as traitors, cursed by the very people they had tried to save. The pavilion master admits she doesn't grasp the meaning behind his words, looking at him with uncertainty. He questions if she is truly prepared for the sacrifices that come with pursuing what she believes is right. His clothes billow in the night wind as he asks if she would still act if it meant innocent people would suffer for her choices. She is quick to deny it, her expression showing her shock at the very suggestion. A dark aura begins to emanate from So-hyun, as he states that history's flow can only be changed with bloodshed. He brings a white mask to his face, explaining that those who are truly good cannot sacrifice the innocent for the greater good. The pavilion master's eyes widen in recognition and terror as she sees the mask. Enveloped in swirling shadows, So-hyun reflects on the foolishness of his youthful dreams to change the world as he assumes his true, darker persona. So-hyun walks away, his robe fluttering as shadows begin to cling to his footsteps. He explains that his life was supposed to be simple, but the darkness had other plans. He stands at the center of a massive shadow vortex, looking more like a god of the underworld than a noble. The mask hides his face, but the purple glow in his eyes reveals his true, cold nature. The pavilion master is frozen in shock, her breath hitching as she realizes what she's looking at. He leans in closer, telling her that he'll be watching her destiny with interest. He declares that his path is a demonic one, paved with mountains of corpses. A monstrous, jagged face looms in the shadows behind him, screaming into the void. The master is left gasping for air, wondering who or what the young master has become. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Luyang slums, a place where Mercy went to die long ago. This is the heart of Black Bone Gang territory, and they've made it their personal playground. One of the gang's gatekeepers sits outside, bored and completely oblivious. He's busy daydreaming about a promotion and finally having someone to boss around. Suddenly, a voice from the dark calls out, asking if this is the gang's office. So-hyun steps into the light, his mask gleaming under the moon. The thug just laughs, calling him a scrawny runt and telling him to beat it. So-hyun isn't there for a job, but the guy doesn't seem to get the hint. The gatekeeper decides to be nice and give the kid a personal interview. He tells him to survive 2 hits if he wants to join the ranks. So-hyun's eyes flare. He's already bored with the conversation. The thug throws a heavy punch, screaming at him to get lost. So-hyun just vanishes, sliding through the air like a ghost. He's behind the guy in a heartbeat, his presence turning the air cold. He grabs the man's head and whispers that he's here to devour them all. His fingers sink into the skull as dark energy erupts like ink. He lifts the massive thug off the ground, declaring the start of the banquet. The gatekeeper panics, his bravado replaced by sheer terror. So-hyun commands him to sing as the pressure starts to build. Shadows spiral from his palm, consuming the space around them. The demonic power swirls into a violent vortex. He tells him that the most important part of singing is breathing, and then he cuts it off. Bones snap and pop under the crushing weight of the shadows. He lets out a dark laugh, thoroughly enjoying the carnage. With a final surge of power, he slams the man into the ground. The gatekeeper's scream is cut short as his body is pulverized. So-hyun stands over the wreckage, disappointed that the man didn't last longer. He looks down at the remnants, his mask almost seeming to vibrate with hunger. The jaw of the mask opens, revealing a jagged row of terrifying teeth. He steps forward, ready for the main course of his feast. A group of thugs rushes out from the building, weapons drawn and terrified. "Well, hello there," he says, greeting the newcomers with chilling politeness. The gang members demand to know who he is, but it's already too late. The gang members are livid. They can't believe some masked kid has the nerve to walk into their branch office and start a fight. "Don't worry about who I am," So-hyun says, the mask hiding his grin. "Let's just enjoy this banquet together." He moves through them like a blur, turning their territory into a personal slaughterhouse. One of the bruisers swings a massive blade, screaming that the kid must be begging for death. So-hyun parries the strike with effortless grace, his speed on a completely different level. The thug's face contorts as his own momentum is turned right back against him. It's not even a fight, it's a massacre. Blood sprays as he cuts through them like paper. He slams another thug into the dirt, leaving the rest to panic and shout for reinforcements. They try to charge him all at once, hoping their numbers will finally make a difference. So-hyun just stands his ground, eyes glowing purple. To him, this isn't a battle, it's a dance. "Struggle all you want," he whispers, his hand glowing with ink-like energy. He unleashes a massive shockwave of shadows that sends the entire group flying back. The room is filled with the sounds of snapping bones and desperate final screams. He chuckles to himself, reveling in the music and food he's found in this banquet hall. The remaining thugs are skewered by dark energy before they can even draw a breath to scream. He stands at the center of the carnage, a silhouette of death in a sea of purple light. In just moments, a pile of corpses is all that remains of the gang's front line. He stands over the bodies, the dark energy crackling around him like a satisfied predator. He looks around at the silence. "Is it over already?" he asks, almost sounding disappointed. He looks down at a survivor, his excitement only just starting to reach its peak. He grabs the man by the throat, declaring he'll have to satisfy his void hunger with whatever is left. The thug begs for his life, but So-hyun is more interested in which part of him will grant satiety. The mask seems to pulse with a life of its own as he considers the best way to feed. Suddenly, a flash of blue chi cuts through the air, forcing him to shift his focus. He narrows his eyes, surprised that someone actually had the skill to interrupt him. A rugged black-boned swordsman leaps into the fray, his blade glowing with a fierce blue light. The newcomer looks at the masked figure in horror, demanding to know what kind of creature he's dealing with. He unleashes a whirlwind of high-speed strikes, desperately trying to drive the intruder back. The two blades clash in a flurry of sparks, metal ringing out through the quiet slums. So-hyun lands softly, his footing as steady as a mountain. He looks at the new arrival with genuine interest. Oh, has a real martial artist finally shown up? The purple flame in his eye flares up, finally a course worth eating. Yoon So-hyun stands shrouded in dark energy, facing down his next victim. The Black Bone gang leader is already sweating buckets, convinced he's looking at a monster. He doesn't wait around for an invitation and lunges forward. The leader puts everything into a heavy, glowing downward strike. He attempts his rotating wheel technique, unleashing a flurry of blue slashes. But every blow is stopped cold by a wall of pure purple energy. Behind the mask, the intruder just lets out a chilling laugh. He easily holds back the sword and asks if that pathetic display was really his best. The gang boss's pride is shattered, and he curses through gritted teeth. A dark, claw-like hand reaches out from the shadows. Purple tendrils erupt, tearing right through the man's chest. One final spike goes straight through his jaw, silencing him for good. So-hyun steps over the fresh corpse without a second thought. He stands tall amidst the carnage he just created. The masked warrior actually sounds disappointed that the fun ended so quickly. Welcome to the Black Bone Gang's secret underground chamber. The intruder walks past what's left of the guards' heads. He heads deeper into the dark stone halls of the hideout. Even without the mask's full glow, the look in his eyes is terrifying. Another guard jumps him, screaming about trespassing. It's a fatal mistake, So-hyun counters with a massive energy wave. The attacker is blasted back and crashes into the stone floor. Dark mist follows the young master's every step as he moves forward. He finds a room where people are hung up from the ceiling like meat. His eyes glow purple as he tries to process the sheer horror of this place. The last surviving gang member begs him to stay back. So-hyun doesn't listen and steps right up to the coward. He pins the man's leg to the floor, and the guy starts screaming in terror. The man shrieks in agony as his bones snaps under the pressure. So-hyun grabs him by the hair, staring around at the human slaughterhouse. The stench of blood is everywhere, and bodies hang like forgotten livestock. He realizes just how truly broken and mad this world has become. The guy calls him a crazy monster, but the intruder isn't buying it. He points out the hypocrisy. These thugs treat butchering people like a normal day job. The man tries to justify his crimes as just business, while pleading for his life. So-hyun has heard enough and channels his energy for the final blow. He slams the man's head into the floor with enough force to shatter the stone. One final heavy impact finishes the job. Standing over the mess, he wonders why his violence is called madness, while their butchery is called business. He unmasks for a moment, reaching out to comfort a traumatized survivor. He leaves the chamber behind, still questioning who's the real lunatic in this world. Across the city, we shift to Jeomjo's private hideout. Jeomjo relaxes in her bath, but it's not water she's soaking in. She toys with a rose, her mind drifting back to the swordless one. Looking back, something about the report from this morning didn't sit right with her. She remembers Yoon So-hyun's smile, the supposedly weak first young master. He was nothing like the useless guy the rumors made him out to be. Even in a room full of killers, he stayed calm and strangely confident. She starts to wonder if the kid is hiding a massive secret. But she quickly shakes it off and tells the chief manager the bath is getting cold. The manager is on it immediately, bowing to her every whim. He stands at the entrance of her decadent, steam-filled chamber. He orders the men to hurry up with the fresh water. Two goons haul in a terrified girl, telling her to shut up as she begs for her life. Jeomjo complains that the freshness of the blood is starting to lack. The victim is held over the edge of the tub, crying out for mercy that isn't coming. With a bored expression, the lady gives the order to begin the harvest. A subordinate raises a heavy blade, ready to execute her command. The sound of a clean swing cuts through the silence of the room. Fresh crimson liquid sprays everywhere, refilling the bath. Jeomjo sighs to herself, worried about the wrinkles she's been getting lately. She splashes the warm blood over her face like it's a high-end spa treatment. She breaks into a twisted laugh, feeling refreshed by the sacrifice. Outside, the peace of the night is broken by a panicked report from the factories. Jeomjo checks herself in the mirror, stunned by the news of the attack. She demands to know which idiot dared to strike one of her facilities. The manager explains they have no details because the survivors are literally insane. She snaps, refusing to believe they didn't get a single piece of info. Apparently, the few left alive kept babbling about some kind of evil spirit. Her eyes narrow as she tries to figure out who's behind the chaos. When they mention a white mask, she looks like she's finally interested. She stands with her inner circle, processing the sudden threat to her business. She assumes some master just got bored and decided to pick a fight with them. The chief manager recalls a similar incident with a wanderer master last year. He lectures about how few people are actually born with the talent for energy. And of those few, an even smaller fraction ever reach the rank of master. Jeomjo brushes her hair, annoyed that these rare masters keep popping up. She tells the boys to keep a low profile until this thing blows over. She wonders which bored bastard is out there playing hero this time. She scoffs at the idea of chivalry, calling it nothing but hero complex nonsense. The management subordinate looks a bit uneasy about the whole situation. He speaks up, trying to connect the dots between recent events. He brings up the outsourced workers from the gambling house who went missing. The chief manager brushes it off, since hired thugs vanish all the time. The management subordinate trails off, sweating under the weight of Jeomjo's intense gaze. She loses her cool immediately, barking at him to stop hesitating and finish his sentence. He mentions a rumor he heard at a gambling den, something about a mysterious ghost appearing at night. A vision of the white masked demon flashes through his mind, a creature born of pure, swirling shadow. Despite his skepticism, he admits it's hard to ignore a story so many people are swearing is true. Jeomjo isn't having it. She snaps at him for repeating the useless babbling of panicked, dying men. She demands that they stick to productive business talk instead of indulging in ghost stories. Yet a cold realization begins to dawn in her eyes as she wonders if there is more to the story. She recalls her own mentor, a master who taught her a bizarre and unknown style of martial arts. Her inner monologue is cut short by the chief manager, who bursts back into the room in a panic. He screams out the bad news. Another one of their branch offices has been completely leveled. Jiamzhou's eyes go wide with rage as she asks if the white mask bastard is behind this one too. She takes a deep breath, trying to hide her face as she admits she expected to lose more than just a few. She acknowledges that this masked attacker isn't just a lucky thug, he is definitely a high-level master. She decides their best play is to stay out of his way until his rampage naturally cools off. The chief manager reminds her that hearing outside masters to fight back is simply too expensive for now. Dismissing the whole mess, Jiamzhou orders them out and demands a masseuse to help her relax. The manager offers a quick bow of acknowledgement before turning to leave the chamber. But before they can exit, a loud sound echoes through the hall as someone else calls for the manager. Jiamzhou whips her head around, her teeth bared in anger as she senses another disaster incoming. The sun rises over Luoyang, casting a bright light on the bustling city streets. Despite the early hour, the locals are already whispering about the massacre from the night before. One man claims 7 of the Black Bone Gang's dens were hit, though others have different counts. The numbers grow more ridiculous with every telling. 10, 15, the rumors are out of control. The most terrifying detail is that the attacker left no bodies and not a single drop of blood behind. Civilians whisper about an evil demon, wondering what kind of force could cause such total erasure. High above the city, the Luoyang Sword Clan sits in its imposing, multi-story pagoda. Inside the Grand Hall, Jiamzhou stands before the clan's throne, surrounded by lines of stoic warriors. Yon Kang sits atop the throne, looking bored as he questions why she's bothering him so early. He looks down on her, offended by the suggestion that his clan might be lacking in information. Jiamzhou flinches, the intimidation factor of the Sword Clan leader hitting her like a physical blow. She drops into a deep, submissive bow, quickly apologizing for her perceived insolence. Yon Kang tells her to know her place, dismissing her concerns as a mere delusion. His eye glows with a sinister red light as he questions why she thinks she earned his clan's medallion. Jiamzhou remains silent, sweat dripping down her face as she endures his verbal lashing. She stammers out an apology, swearing she never intended to disrespect his authority. A large hourglass on the table marks the passing of time, its sand falling steadily. Yon Kang complains that she has already wasted 15 minutes of his morning with her nonsense. He orders her to get out of his sight immediately, his voice cold and final. Jiamzhou kowtows deeply, touching her forehead to the floor in a display of absolute submission. She turns and walks away, her expression hardening as she leaves the oppressive hall behind. But Yon Kang isn't done. He warns her that if she disappoints him one more time, there will be no mercy. Jiamzhou stands alone in the grand hall, her back turned as she absorbs the weight of her failure. Yon Kang's eyes narrow with cold disdain as he threatens to strip her of her status and give the bronze medallion to someone else. Panic and humiliation wash over Jiamzhou, her expression twisting as she realizes how close she is to losing everything. Above the city of Luoyang, the clouds drift lazily across a serene blue sky, a stark contrast to the brewing storm of politics below. In a secluded mountain post, the Sword Clan's astronomical office stands quiet and unassuming amidst the peaks. Inside, one of the officers has fallen fast asleep at his desk, surrounded by stacks of old books and empty bottles. The aide enters the room with a heavy sigh, finding his colleague once again neglecting his duties. He doesn't hold back, grabbing the sleeping officer and shaking him awake to announce a major crisis. As he recovers, the goateed officer asks if the aide is still wasting his time on the lonely night watch. The aide ignores the jab, his face hardening as he warns that he's witnessed a terrifying ill omen. His colleague scoffs while taking a drink, insisting that such bad signs are common and meaningless. But the aide's voice drops to a whisper, stressing that this particular omen is far from common. He reveals that he spotted the heavenly killing star, a legendary celestial body that signals catastrophe. The goateed officer's eyes widen in shock, the cup nearly slipping from his hand at the mention of the star. The very thought of the star brings to mind images of a dark warrior standing over an endless pile of victims. The light-hearted mood in the room evaporates as the officer realizes the gravity of the aide's discovery. The aide suggests reporting this to the clan's superiors, though he knows the response will likely be cold. His colleague laughs bitterly, doubting that any of the high-ranking masters would listen to humble astronomers. Desperate, the aide proposes they at least tell their department's chief supervisor. The goateed officer doesn't see the point, knowing their supervisor lacks the clout to change anything. Their boss is Yeon So-hyun, a young man known as the most powerless authority figure in the entire Sword clan. Far away from the halls of power, night falls over a small, makeshift camp where a different kind of gathering is taking place. A group of commoners and thugs have surrounded a mysterious figure, eagerly asking him if he's seen any visions today. The Black Bone gang leader shouts at the crowd to back off, warning them not to disturb the hut scholar while he's in thought. In the quiet of the night, an old man sits alone, lost in his own world. Above him, the sky is thick with heavy, suffocating clouds. The hut scholar reaches out into the void, muttering that the sun has vanished from his sight. He looks distressed, his face twisting as he realizes the light is gone. He stumbles to his feet, barely able to keep his balance. He throws his arms up, screaming for all to hear that the Lord of the Dark Heaven has finally arrived. The scholar raves about an ancient monster awakening to devour the shadows. The people around him can only stare in confusion as he shouts about a punisher descending from the darkness. He calls out to the starving and the hopeless, telling them to rejoice in this grim coming. He dances like a madman, prophesying that the Venerable One will strike down the wicked with black lightning. Bystanders whisper among themselves, convinced the old man has finally lost his mind. But the scholar doesn't care, continuing to hail the arrival of his true master. He warns that no sinner will escape the judgment of the agent in the white mask. The shadows themselves seem to pulse with a terrifying new energy. Elsewhere, Jayu Sia sits at her desk, contemplating the sudden collapse of the Black Bone gang. The reports all point to one culprit, the demon in the white mask. The image of the masked figure lingers in her mind as she ponders the identity of this new threat. She turns to her escort and asks for her opinion on the matter. Jayu Sia remains deep in thought. The escort brings up the first young master of the Sword clan, but she makes the mistake of using a disrespectful nickname. Sia immediately snaps at her, ordering her never to call him the Swordless One again. The escort apologizes, nodding that the man is nothing like the rumors say. Sia warns her to keep their connection to the Crescent Moon Pavilion a secret. The escort admits she found him surprisingly magnanimous during their encounter. She explains that she tried to intimidate him with her killing intent, but he didn't even flinch. This news clearly piques Sia's interest. The conversation is cut short when someone calls out for Jayu. They find Young-ah working away in the kitchen. Young-ah looks up, curious if they were talking about her master. Sia plays it cool, claiming she just wanted to see what kind of person the master's sister is. Young-ah turns back to her cooking, saying she has nothing to share. Sia teases her about how fiercely she defended him before. She asks how Young-ah is feeling, and the girl credits So-hyun for her recovery. Sia realizes that if she wants real answers, she'll have to face him herself. Fresh tea is poured as the atmosphere in the room shifts. So-hyun welcomes them, warning his guest to leave the hostility at the door so they don't ruin the tea. The escort remains tense, but So-hyun just smiles, telling her the task is finished. He encourages them to drink while it's hot. Sia looks slightly flustered by his composed demeanor. The escort takes her cup, thanking him for the hospitality. She compliments the aroma, impressed by his knowledge of tea. So-hyun simply smiles, telling her she flatters him too much. The escort doesn't hold back, telling him straight up that she isn't a woman who minces her words. So-hyun finds her honesty amusing, and even jokes that she should let him know if she ever wants a career change. She plays along, saying she'll come find him if she loses her job, which might be sooner than expected given Sia's current mood. The young master lets out a genuine laugh at the banter. Sia watches them, silently surprised that her usually picky escort is acting so comfortable around him. So-hyun's smile remains, but the air starts to feel a little different. He cuts to the chase, asking why such a busy person would bother visiting an idler like himself. The room goes quiet as Sia prepares to address the elephant in the room. She grips her hands tightly, her composure starting to slip under the pressure. Then she drops the bombshell, asking him directly if he's the venerable one of the dark heaven. So-hyun doesn't miss a beat, hiding his reaction behind his teacup as he asks who that is. Si-ah explains that survivors from the Black Bone gang slaughter described a very specific savior. They saw a man in a white mask and the robes of a scholar, exactly like the ones So-hyun owns. So-hyun just smiles and remarks that this mysterious person sounds like they're doing good deeds for the world. Si-ah isn't backing down, pointing out the suspicious coincidence of him having those exact items. He leans in slightly, asking if she's really planning to search his room for proof. Getting desperate, Si-ah asks why he's hiding the truth and what his previous words to her were supposed to mean. The playful atmosphere has completely vanished, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. So-hyun slowly sets his cup down on the table with a firm click. His eyes sharpen as he looks her dead in the face and asks one final, chilling question. Does she truly have the resolve to know? Jae-sia asks if he's truly ready for the consequences of his plans. Yoon So-hyun remains calm, claiming he's fully prepared for whatever's coming next. Si-ah admits she hasn't been able to stop thinking about his words. The cost of changing history is always paid in a river of blood. She grips her knee, asking if he's really okay with sacrificing the innocent for his cause. She flat out asks if he's planning to start a full-blown revolution. So-hyun just smirks at the idea. He starts quoting philosophy about how a ruler who loses their virtue is nothing more than a common thief. He keeps the lecture going, saying a cruel oppressor isn't even worth being called a king. His reflection in the tea looks way colder than his polite exterior suggests. Si-ah asks if that's the dark path he's actually planning to walk. A vision of mountains of corpses and seas of blood shows exactly what she's worried about. The demonic path is filled with nothing but suffering. She says that kind of question is way beyond her ability to answer. She points out that while the world is a mess, it somehow stays stable. So-hyun notes that talking about being a good person in these times sounds like a joke. Si-ah finally asks what his actual path is then. He says he's given it a lot of thought. He wonders if people always have to die for some great cause. Suddenly, his face shifts into something terrifying as he asks about just slaughtering the wicked instead. Si-ah is completely stunned by the suggestion. He doubles down, asking why they don't just spill the blood of the bad guys rather than the innocent. She asks if he's joking because that's not how sacrifice is supposed to work. He just shrugs it off as a hypothetical scenario. He gets up and starts walking away, calling it a simple thought experiment. Si-ah calls it a total fantasy, wondering how anyone could even tell the good from the bad. She asks what the standard would even be, morality or the law. She tells him that just executing everyone he thinks is wicked is straight-up madness. In her view, no single person has that kind of power to alter history. She says anyone who tried would just become an even greater evil. She stops mid-sentence as a chill runs down her spine. A vision of a white mask appears, the symbol of the agent of heavenly punishment. Dark energy explodes around So-hyun as he looks back with a cold stare. Si-ah realizes who she's actually talking to, the venerable one of the dark heaven. He lets out a sharp-toothed grin, liking the sound of that title. Si-ah is left speechless by the sudden shift in atmosphere. He switches back to his polite mask, wondering if his childish fantasy is actually possible. Si-ah is left reeling, thinking that only a literal demon from hell would take that path. She stays quiet for a second, looking visibly shaken. She stands up to leave, saying she's got duties to attend to. So-hyun just tells her to keep up the good work while her back is turned. She walks out as fast as she can. Jae-sia notes that the Black Bone gang has been backed into their final stronghold. She's planning to lead an elite team and their allies straight to the base. Yoon So-hyun points out that Lady Jeomjo holds a high-ranking plaque, making this move incredibly dangerous. Sia clarifies that they aren't the ones who will be doing the heavy lifting during the breach. They won't just be sitting on the sidelines either. They're going to ensure no one escapes alive. She's fully prepared to deal with anyone from the Sword Clan who tries to interfere. If it comes down to it, she's ready to fight the person responsible for giving Jeomjo that plaque. So-hyun just gives a cold, knowing smile. They've already made up their minds to see this through to the end. So-hyun stares out, knowing things are about to get messy. He stands alone, looking out at the city as the sun begins to set. The scene shifts to the Black Bone Gang's territory, where the atmosphere is thick with violence. A massive, tattooed executioner mocks anyone attempting to flee the gang. A severed head hits the ground as a brutal reminder of what happens to deserters. He calls them all cowards as he stands over the bloodied remains. He shouts that they're just following Lady Jeomjo's direct orders. He raises his bloody blade, demanding they prepare for what he calls an honorable death. Meanwhile, at Jeomjo's hideout, the tension is just as high. Lady Jeomjo asks if her father has really refused to send any help. Her subordinate confirms that he flat-out turned them down. She realizes he's not willing to waste his best warriors on an unknown threat. She grits her teeth, knowing their supposed bond was always a lie. To Jeomjil, she's just another tool to be used and discarded. The subordinate mentions that Lord Jeomjil actually left a final message for her. She demands to hear it immediately, her patience wearing thin. Her eyes flare with a terrifying, demonic light as she hears the news. She lets out a primal scream of pure rage. She's practically frothing at the mouth as she processes the betrayal. She demands to know how many slaves are left at their base. The subordinate nervously explains that they don't have many left on hand. She really didn't want to use the twisted secret art her master taught her until the very end. She orders him to round up every slave and non-combatant into the basement. With a manic, bloody grin, she decides it's time for the ritual. As the sun sets, a dark shadow looms over the hideout. A crow lets out a sharp, ominous cry as it flies over the city. Dusk has fallen over the district, and the silence is about to be broken. A group of masked fighters moves silently through the streets. The lead scout reports that there's still no sign of the target yet. The fighters stand ready, their hands on their weapons as they wait for the signal. They're armed with everything from daggers to razor-sharp claws. The crow continues to circle overhead, watching the ambush unfold from above. One of the masked assassins watches from a rooftop, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A masked scout keeps a watchful eye on the perimeter, his gaze piercing through the twilight. He looks up at a figure on the rooftop, waiting for the signal to begin the operation. The heavy sound of footsteps announces the arrival of a high-ranking commander. The bearded commander receives word from his men that Squad 15 is finally in position. Squad 15 is in position, confirmed, he reports, his voice low and serious. A subordinate bows respectfully, ready to execute the next phase of the raid. With a sudden, explosive movement, the assassins leap into the air. They bound across the rooftops like shadows, closing in on the Black Bone sect's heart. One of the scouts lands gracefully on a balcony, moving with practiced silence. He kneels before the pavilion master, reporting that the nearby civilians have been evacuated. Jayu-si listens as he confirms that all agents and collaborators are on standby. Everyone hold your current positions and stay alert, Sia commands, her focus absolute. She tells her warriors to engage according to the rules of engagement once the fighting breaks out. High above the city, the strongholds of Luoyang stand bathed in the orange glow of sunset. Sia stares out at the horizon, her expression unreadable behind her eye patch. The sky is a mix of gold and crimson, a beautiful sight before the coming slaughter. Her escort approaches and asks if she's feeling anxious about the mission. Rather than anxious, it's a bit complicated, Sia replies, her thoughts elsewhere. She asks if the escort overheard her conversation with So-hyun earlier that day. The escort tries to play it dumb, but she can't hide the fact that So-hyun's words stuck with her. The subordinate eventually asks what Sia really thinks of the eldest young master. She thinks of Yeon So-hyun, a man who is as kind as he is terrifying. I think he is a good person, though he is a scary one, Sia admits, following her intuition. The escort reaffirms her loyalty, stating she will follow wherever her lady goes. Follow your heart, Sia says softly, looking at her friend with genuine care. She grips the wooden railing of the pavilion, her mind finally made up. With a gentle touch on the shoulder, Sia signals that it's time for them to move. She strides forward, leaving her doubts behind as she heads into the fray. She still thinks So-hyun's plan to change the world by killing the wicked is insane. And yet, there's something about him that makes her think he might just be able to pull it off. Sia looks back one last time, her resolve as sharp as a blade. She envisions the dark, immense power of the Venerable One of the Dark Heavens. The scene shifts to the main headquarters of the Black Bone, sect at the edge of the city. The Black Bone gang members stand in the courtyard, their chests covered in terrifying skull tattoos. He screams in fury as he realizes they are being raided by masked intruders. His men are shocked that anyone would dare to mess with their gang. A large group of thugs gathers, their confusion turning into aggressive anger. "Attack them right now," one of the leaders yells, ordering a full-scale counterattack. A pavilion warrior draws his sword with a chilling sense of calm. In an instant, he strikes, his blade cutting through the air and his enemies alike. One of the gang members lets out a confused sound just before he is hit. Blood sprays everywhere as the scarred gang member watches his world fall apart. The scarred gang member stares in wide-eyed terror as the pavilion's assault decimates his comrades. A pavilion assassin's foot steps firmly onto the blood-splattered tiles of the courtyard. In a flash of steel, a masked warrior strikes down the Black Bone gang leader with lethal precision. Another pavilion agent lunges through the smoke, his blade finding its mark in the chaos. The gang leader can only gasp in shock as a cold blade is driven deep into his chest. From above, the courtyard is a grisly scene of fallen bodies and desperate pleas for mercy. A tattooed thug screams in a mix of rage and panic, realizing their defenses are failing. "Damn it, this isn't working," he bellows, ordering his men to clear a path for the reserves. The pavilion assassins keep their eyes forward, undeterred by the carnage around them. One of the masked warriors narrows his eyes, sensing a new threat emerging from the shadows. A wave of muscular spear-wielders marches out, their faces set in grim determination. The sunlight glints off the countless spear tips, creating a wall of sharp, unforgiving metal. "SSB Yares?" one of the pavilion agents shouts, alerting the others to the sudden counterattack. Jayu escort turns to her mistress with urgency, shouting, "Pavilion Master!" as the situation escalates. Jayu Sia observes the battlefield, nodding that the enemy has even pulled their headquarters, guards, into the fight. She immediately orders her reserve forces to deploy, and for everyone else to scatter and adapt. Sia remains composed, watching as the Black Bone sect gambles everything on this desperate stand. Her escort worries that deploying all their forces will leave them short on manpower if masters appear. "Don't worry," Sia says calmly. "Reinforcements who hate the Black Bone sect will arrive soon." The escort is skeptical, wondering who would dare attack someone holding the sword house's token. Jayu Ah looks away for a moment, a slight sweat on her brow as she considers the risk she's taken. She admits that she has staked the success of this mission on a grand promise made to a certain person. Then, with a confident smile, she reminds her subordinate that they have the Venerable One on their side. She grips the wooden railing tightly, placing all her trust in Yoon So-hyun's rumored power. A massive explosion rips through the top of the pavilion. The force of the blast sends everyone flying. Jayu Ah's eye widens as she tries to make sense of the chaos. Debris falls all around them in the aftermath. A hand reaches out and grabs a sleeve just in time. Jayu escort catches Jayu Ah and leaps away from the collapsing deck. The escort checks on her lady, who's still reeling from the shock. Jayu escort stares into the smoke, trying to spot the enemy. The entire building is engulfed in flames. A high-pitched, mocking laugh echoes through the destruction. Jayu Ah looks up, recognizing the voice instantly. A twisted, manic grin stares back at her. Jiamzhou emerges from the wreckage, looking like a complete monster. Her face is cracked with dark veins, and her eyes glow a blood red. Thick smoke from the explosion billows high over the city. The interior of the building is nothing but shattered wood and fire. Jiamzhou continues to laugh like a madwoman. Jiu Xia is paralyzed by the sight. Jiamzhou's hand has morphed into a sharp, demonic claw. She lunges forward, her blonde hair trailing behind her. The blonde demon stands tall, wreathed in a jagged red aura. Jiu Xia is frozen, wondering how she could have transformed like this. Jiamzhou addresses the master of the Hyunwall Pavilion directly. She screams for Jiu Xia to die as she dives in for the kill. Xia can't even react to the sheer speed. Jiu Escort reaches out, desperate to protect her mistress. Jiamzhou drops down like a predator. Jiu Escort pushes Xia away, telling her to escape while she can. Xia watches in shock as her protector steps into the line of fire. Jiamzhou just bares her teeth, ready to tear through anything in her path. Jiu Escort charges ahead, shouting for Xia to survive. Xia's mind races back to Yon So-hyun, wondering where he is in this mess. Black smoke chokes the evening sky. Jiamzhou looks more annoyed than anything else. She watches Jiu Xia try to pull back. Jiu Escort stands her ground and tells the monster her opponent is right here. Jiamzhou tells the girl to get out of her way. Jiu Escort draws her blade and readies herself. She refuses to back down, letting her pride lead the way. In the world of martial arts, there's a limit known as the wall. It's the invisible point where most fighters find their progress coming to a dead stop. But those who manage to cross it become something far beyond human. Crossing that threshold means the fighter finally has room to grow again. People refer to the legends who make it past that point as experts. Jiu Escort takes a defensive stance, but the pressure is unlike anything she's ever felt. She realizes that unlike herself, Jiamzhou has already crossed that final wall. The blonde monster lunges, her red eyes burning with demonic bloodlust. Her face is a twisted mask of rage as she closes the distance in an instant. A single strike from Jiamzhou shatters the very roof beneath their feet. Jiu Escort barely manages to leap away from the sudden devastation. But Jiamzhou is already on her, tracking her every movement with ease. She lashes out with clawed fingers that can tear through solid stone. A barrage of red energy strikes rains down on the masked protector. Jiu Escort struggles to keep her guard up as the powerful strikes connect. The sheer strength behind these blows is simply not human anymore. A massive explosion of red chi erupts as the two warriors clash. Jiamzhou laughs, mocking the escort for thinking she could ever stand a chance. Red energy claws rake through the air with terrifying speed and precision. Jiu Escort is forced back, her defenses starting to crumble under the weight. The impact of the battle sends shockwaves through the entire burning building. Jiamzhou looms over her, a sharp claw raised to deliver the final blow. The escort can only watch in horror as death stares her right in the face. The monster screams at her to just get the hell out of her way. A blinding burst of light and energy consumes the entire area. The blow connects with a sickening force that rattles the escort's bones. She slammed into the wall, coughing up blood as she slumps to the floor. Jiamzhou walks forward slowly, her movements predator-like and smooth. She stands over the defeated warrior, looking down with nothing but pure disdain. She's actually impressed that the girl didn't die from that last hit. Jiu Escort can barely keep her eyes open, her mask torn and her face bruised. Her hand trembles on the floor as her internal power completely runs dry. It hits her that Jiamzhou hasn't even bothered to use a weapon yet. The blonde demon stands there, wreathed in dark energy and looking untouchable. Jiu Escort tries to reach for her sword hilt one last time. She forces herself to look up, refusing to give her enemy the satisfaction of seeing her break. Jiamzhou's smile fades, clearly annoyed that her victim won't beg for mercy. She sneers at the escort, calling her nothing more than an insolent little wench. The red aura around Jiamzhou intensifies until it feels like it's swallowing the room. A wave of pure killing intent washes over the escort, freezing her in place. The monster prepares to finish the job once, and for all with a final strike. As the blow descends, the escort closes her eyes and accepts that this is the end. Suddenly, a heavy, spiked metal gauntlet enters the frame. Gauntlet Girl steps in out of nowhere, blocking the massive strike with a smirk. Jayu escort stares in total disbelief, wondering who this new arrival could possibly be. Gauntlet Girl lets out a steady breath, standing firm as the primary line of defense for the wounded escort. She offers a confident, almost playful smirk despite the lethal stakes of the encounter. "Did you wait long?" she asks, as Jayu escort looks up in a daze, barely able to believe that help has actually arrived. But with GM Joe's current power, no number of warriors would be enough to stop her. She just swatted away the new arrival with a single move. Gauntlet Girl slams onto the floor and coughs, but she quickly regains her energy. "I'm fine," Gauntlet Girl shouts back with infectious energy. "We're the reinforcements you've been waiting for." The bearded warrior steps forward, his massive blade cutting a wide arc through the air as he warns the others to stay alert. The air itself seems to thicken with GM Joe's malevolent energy, a grim reminder of just how formidable their opponent truly is. "I don't know if we'll make it out of here alive," the warrior mutters, though the girl beside him is much more optimistic about their chances. Jayu escort watches them with a mix of hope and dread, wondering if just the two of them will be enough to turn the tide. Gauntlet Girl gives a slightly sheepish look, admitting that they are currently the only help available. The three of them stand together on the shattered roof, a small band of warriors facing down a literal demon. Realizing there's no more help coming, Jayu escort forces herself to stand and draws her weapon once more. They face the overwhelming wall of red chi together, their resolve the only thing keeping the darkness at bay. GM Joe's grin widens into something truly horrific as she dares the insects to challenge her all at once. The sun sets over Luoyang, but the sky is stained with more than just the evening light. A tattered flag is all that's left of the clan's pride as the estate burns. Chaos erupts in every corner as the Luoyang forces find themselves completely overwhelmed. Jayu Xia grits her teeth. She can feel the control slipping through her fingers. She looks out at the carnage, realizing the defense has completely collapsed. The grand pavilions are nothing but fuel for a fire that's consuming everything. Jayu Xia calls out for backup, but the response is a cold silence. She yells for Squad 3, but the realization hits that no help is coming. A panicked soldier screams for a retreat as the body count becomes too much to handle. Reports flood in of squads being wiped out or forced back into the flames. Jayu Xia stands frozen. Nothing about this attack makes any sense. The sounds of clashing steel are quickly drowned out by the screams of her men. The attackers are cutting through them like they aren't even there. A massive blade cleaves through the air, ending another life in a flash of red. Every swing from the invaders carries a terrifying weight that shatters bones. Even the most skilled Luoyang guards find their strikes doing absolutely nothing. A guard looks on in horror as he sees what he's actually up against. The enemy just laughs, even as a sword is buried deep in his chest. They aren't humans, they're monsters that don't feel a shred of pain. One of them lunges forward, tearing through the defenses with pure animalistic strength. The black-clad guard sends the Black Bone Gang's executioner flying. He raises his sword to deliver the final blow. His eyes shine with iron determination. In a spray of blood, he puts an end to the executioner's life. The ground is soaked through, and the air is thick with the scent of iron. The thug collapses onto the stone floor, but the battle is still at its peak. The massacre continues as the Black Bone sect members tear the estate apart. A guard realizes too late that these monsters have completely overrun the inner courtyard. It's a scene of pure devastation, with bodies littering the scorched earth. Fear takes hold of the survivors as they realize there's nowhere left to run. Those once proud pavilions have now been reduced to a living hell. Smoke chokes the air, masking the faces of those who didn't make it. Amidst the screams, a manic laughter rings out from the center of the yard. The three Jiu escorts are still doing their best to hold Jiamzhou back. The red-robed demon towers over them, enjoying every second of their terror. Gauntlet Girl can only watch silently as her teammates struggle with all their might. A green light flickers, the last bit of energy they have left to fight back. But Gauntlet Girl has reached her limit, coughing up blood under the immense pressure. The demon laughs harder, mocking their pathetic attempt to survive. Essie tells them not to worry, because she's sending them to join their master in the afterlife. The Jiu escort looks up with a mix of defiance and absolute despair. She grits her teeth, waiting for the final blow that's about to end it all. The Jiu escort screams for the young lady to run, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames. She can only hope the girl managed to escape, even as the smoke closes in around her. She grips her sword tight, her knuckles white with a mixture of fear and determination. She knows there's zero chance of winning, but she won't go down without a fight. Bleeding and broken, she refuses to back down, standing defiantly against the monster before her. The red-robed demon just smiles, deciding it's finally time to put an end to this little game. Essie gathers a massive surge of red energy, preparing to wipe them off the face of the earth. The escort braces for the end, her eyes fixed on the overwhelming power about to descend. She closes her eyes, a single thought of the lady she failed to protect crossing her mind. But as the strike lands, everything suddenly changes, leaving her gasping in shock. Commander Jiu looks back at the estate, her heart sinking as she sees the main pavilion in flames. The fire is out of control, consuming the history and legacy of the Luyang clan in an instant. Suddenly, the very world seems to flicker, reality itself warping in a way she can't explain. Colors invert, and a strange, chilling silence falls over the entire battlefield. The soldiers stop mid-swing, looking around in confusion as the light of the sun is sucked away. An unnatural cold sweeps through the estate, freezing the very breath in their lungs. Even the fire seems to lose its heat, replaced by a visual negative that defies logic. It's the arrival of something ancient and dark, a phenomenon they can only describe as night. A Luyang guard stares wide-eyed at the sudden shift, his mind unable to process the distortion. The Blackbone sect soldiers are just as lost, their momentum completely halted by the pressure. Every single person on the field feels the weight of a gaze that doesn't belong to this world. This is the advent of night, a total eclipse of reality that signals his presence. Jiu can only watch as the sky turns a star-speckled violet, shimmering with dark energy. The air itself seems to vibrate, heralding the arrival of a power that dwarfs everything else. Through the rift in reality, a featureless white mask appears, mocking the very concept of order. A voice echoes through the silence, cold and detached. "Were you waiting for me?" Jiu stares in disbelief at the figure standing amidst the purple haze. It's a reaper with a white face, an entity that shouldn't exist in their world. This is the venerable one of the dark heavens, the manifestation of their ultimate fear. Flashback to a time before the chaos, when Yeon So-hyun first learned the truth of his power. He looks at his teacher, wondering about the true nature of the energy coursing through him. The skeletal figure, the old immortal, explains that demonic chi isn't just martial arts. It's a source of overwhelming strength, but it comes with a terrible price. It's a wicked aura that can destroy a person's very humanity if they aren't careful. There is a severe lack of information, because it simply shouldn't belong here at all. The old immortal laughs, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over a tombstone. Demonic chi is fundamentally different from how any martial artist controls their energy. It is an alien power, a pollutant that originated from somewhere outside their universe. It is something mortal beings were never meant to observe or even imagine. Demonic chi doesn't just damage, it erodes reality, tearing apart the very fabric of existence. Yeon So-hyun listens intently, realizing he's become a vessel for a cosmic horror. His eyes glow with a new understanding, one that will change the world forever. Yeon So-hyun stands wreathed in the purple-black flames of his demonic chi, the power he now understands to be alien and destructive. His eyes glow with a cold, predatory light, behind the bone mask he has donned. Jayusia and her remaining guards are paralyzed, the weight of the sudden darkness pressing down on their chests. The Black Bone sect soldiers look around in confusion, their primitive survival instincts screaming at them to flee. The curtain has risen, So Hyun thinks, his voice muffled but resonant beneath the mask's jagged teeth. He looks out over the burning estate, a manic laugh escaping him as the demonic chi begins to feed on the chaos. The red-robed demon flinches, the sadistic grin finally wiped from his face by a fear she's never felt before. As he looks up at the sky, realizing that even the flames consuming Luyang have been swallowed by this unnatural darkness. His red eyes widen in terror as he stares at the figure descending from the shadows. As he can't understand why he, a master of slaughter, is trembling at the mere presence of this masked boy. Gritting his teeth, the demon tries to force his body to move, his pride refusing to let him submit to fear. He screams at his men from the rooftops, desperate to regain control of the situation. "Fight," she bellows, threatening to kill anyone who dares to retreat from the masked entity. But the thugs see only a reaper before them, their morale shattering like glass. So Hyun stands at the center of the estate, the true demon that has come to end their invasion. Jeomjo curses his subordinates' cowardice, even as his own hands begin to shake. The Black Bone gang members break into a full-blown retreat, their formation dissolving into a panic scramble. A guard asks Jayusia for orders, his voice cracking as he watches the enemy flee from an even greater threat. "Hold your positions," Jayusia commands, her gold eye fixed on the masked boy who was supposed to be a helpless guest. So Hyun pulses with dark energy, the swirling purple mists expanding to fill the courtyard. He mocks the fleeing thugs, telling them that once the performance starts, the actors aren't allowed to leave the stage. The bone mask looms closer, its white, jagged teeth a cruel promise of what's to come. Massive shadowy hands erupt from the ground, their long, spectral fingers reaching for the invaders. One of the hands snags a running thug by the leg, the dark energy burning through his clothes. The man lets out a blood-curdling scream, his escape cut short by the unyielding grip. The shadowy fingers tighten, the pressure enough to snap bone like dry kindling. "Get away!" a thug shrieks as the hands drag him backward into the swirling violet gloom. More hands rise, a forest of dark appendages pulling the Black Bone sect members into the void. The courtyard is filled with the sounds of snapping bone and desperate pleas for mercy that go unanswered. The shadowy claws reach out with supernatural speed, ensuring no one leaves the estate alive. A veteran thug is hoisted into the air, his struggle futile against the overwhelming weight of the demonic chi. Cold, spectral fingers clamp down over a man's face, silencing his screams as they sap the life from his body. A vortex of dark energy pulls the shattered remnants of the enemy force into its center. Men's faces are contorted in agony as they are consumed by the night So Hyun has unleashed. So Hyun remains motionless at the center of the carnage, a silent architect of destruction. Behind the mask, he commands them all to die right where they stand. A shadow hand seizes the head of a tattooed thug, the dark energy beginning to warp his flesh. The man's body begins to bubble and disintegrate, a horrific end at the hands of an alien power. With a violent burst, the shadows shred the invaders, painting the courtyard in a spray of deep crimson. The massacre is absolute. The arrogant invaders are reduced to nothing but gore in an instant. Blood rains down over the estate, as the Black Bone sect is systematically erased from existence. Jayusia watches in stunned horror, her face spattered with the blood of her enemies as she witnesses the birth of a new power. Jayusia's guards shout for her attention, pointing toward the center of the increasingly violent storm. A shadow hand clamps down on a thug's face, the force enough to shatter his skull instantly. The courtyard becomes a charnel house, as the demonic chi rips through flesh and bone without mercy. Jayusia stands frozen, witnessing a level of brutality that transcends martial arts. A spectral hand reaches out from the darkness, a clawed harbinger of the end. So Hyun stands amidst the floating bodies of his enemies, his voice thundering with the demand for them to beg for their lives. He squeezes the life out of another invader, mocking their pleas and telling them to pray to a heaven that doesn't care. The ground itself seems to open up, the shadow hands dragging the screaming men into a bottomless dark. "I have descended here at the call of the innocent," So-hyun declares, the bone mask glowing with a malevolent purple light. Jeom-jo watches from the distance, her own power feeling like a candle flame against a hurricane. Jeom-jo flares his own energy in a desperate attempt to ward off the encroaching night. His pride is the only thing keeping him from fleeing, but even that is beginning to crumble. The remaining Black Bone sect thugs scream for an attack, their panic turning into a blind, suicidal frenzy. Jae-si looks on, her mind racing as she tries to process the sudden reversal of fortune. She notes the sheer number of enemy martial artists, realizing that Lu Yang would have fallen if not for this mysterious intervention. "Should we help?" she whispers, torn between fear of the entity and her duty as pavilion master. A familiar voice tells her there is no need, stopping her in her tracks. Gauntlet Girl and the bearded warrior appear, battered and bloodied but still standing. Jae-si is flooded with relief, rushing to her friend's side to ensure she's truly safe. Si-a's escort, despite the fresh scar across her eye, offers a small, weary smile of greeting. She nods toward the masked figure, crediting their survival to the one she calls the ruler of darkness. Si-a's escort warns that even an expert like the red-robed demon is nothing compared to the monster that has just been unleashed. Yoon So-hyun stares through his mask, the ruler of darkness ready to finish the performance he started.